Chapter 2164. Noah was strong. Very strong. At the very least, from the information collected by the Wuxiang Association, as well as the deeds that everyone in the world knew, Noah's strength was evident. He had once destroyed a stage V zodiacal protozoan in one hit. He had once annihilated an army of thousands of protozoans in an instant. From a human's point of view, this level of achievement was simply appalling. Even from the point of view of the mechanical soldiers, this level of battle record could be considered unbelievable. It should be noted that until now, the existence that could single-handedly annihilate a stage V zodiacal protozoan was the top 3 in the IP ranking. Moreover, they were the initiators who had reached domain. Only Rintaro, who relied on the means left behind by Noah to annihilate a stage V zodiacal protozoan, was able to enter the top 10 in the IP ranking. As for humans, it was simply impossible for them to single-handedly annihilate a stage V protozoan. As for an army of thousands of protozoans, annihilating it in an instant was something that even the most powerful initiators could not do, let alone humans. Therefore, in the eyes of others, Noah's achievement was truly appalling. However, even so, everyone in the world only felt that it was inconceivable and unbelievable, and never once regarded Noah as an omnipotent god. That was because to the outside world, Fairyland had announced more than once that Noah was able to achieve this achievement by relying on a secret weapon. For example, the shattering bullet was the explanation given by Noah. In addition, Rintaro had also used the same bullet to annihilate a stage V zodiacal protozoan, which increased the persuasiveness of this claim. Therefore, in the eyes of others, Noah was able to achieve such a terrifying achievement by relying on that terrifying secret weapon. Then, the announcement of the artificial artifact made everyone believe that compared to his apparent strength, Noah himself was more of a research expert, specializing in all kinds of terrifying secret weapons. In light of this, although humans were shocked by Noah's actions, they did not think that Noah was that terrifying. After all, Noah was just a human. No matter how strong a human was, how strong could he be? At least, in terms of pure strength, even if it was a modified mechanical soldier, it was still far behind the most powerful level of the initiators. There had never been a mechanical soldier that could truly defeat an initiator that had reached the domain level, let alone an ordinary person. Noah's incredible power made his excellency, and the others believed that Noah might have been modified into a mechanical soldier. However, they were all mechanical soldiers. One side only had one person, while the other side had more than 10. What was there to be afraid of? This was what the mechanical soldiers were thinking. Only Yu and Li Chingyin did not dare to underestimate Noah from the beginning to the end. His Excellency was worried that Noah would take out another terrifying secret weapon. Perhaps, that incredible power just now was Noah using some kind of secret weapon. That might not be the case. As for Li Chingyin, it was purely based on the intuition of a strong person. Undoubtedly, Li Chingyin felt that Noah was standing there like an ordinary person. His expression was relaxed, but there was not a single flaw on his body. It was as if he would immediately be killed if he rushed up. This feeling made Li Chingyin extremely vigilant. He did not dare to underestimate Noah at all. There were also mechanical soldiers that were similar to Li Chingyin. These mechanical soldiers, even in the Five Xiang Association, had top-notch combat abilities. They were on the same level as Li Chingyin, and there were even some that surpassed Li Chingyin. However, after being provoked by Noah, no matter how vigilant they were overcome by their own pride and pride. Since bullets won't work, then let's fight directly. Go. Let's go together. If it was any other time, a group of mechanical soldiers who thought highly of themselves would naturally disdain to join forces and bully a single person. However, the person in front of them was an existence that all mechanical soldiers hated. Moreover, the police from Fairy Tale were chasing after him. They could catch up to him at any moment. Since that was the case, they could not care less anymore. Go. Kill him. One by one, the mechanical soldiers moved instantly. Boom. Some of the mechanical soldiers directly broke through the ground and shot out like bullets, charging in Noah's direction. Some of the mechanical soldiers displayed magical abilities, causing the air to tremble slightly. Some were like Tina, able to control items from a distance, causing daggers, blades, and even tires to shoot out like arrows. Some were like Enchanting, able to control other forces. They could either control the wind, merge into the air, become invisible, release scorching flames, or create gravity fields. They attacked Noah dreamily. Suddenly, in front of Noah's vision, there seemed to be endless attacks coming at him. In this regard, Noah only felt that it was rather interesting, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. If that's the case, then I'll play with you. As soon as he finished speaking, Noah stomped on the ground with a force that was pathetically weak compared to his own physical ability, causing the ground to suddenly tremble, and small stones were shaken up. Noah waved his hand and gathered the small stones into his palm. Then he exerted force and threw them out. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Those extremely ordinary-looking pebbles were like many powerful bullets, bringing with them an astonishing force. They brought about sharp sounds of air being torn apart as they shot forward, heading toward the incoming mechanical soldiers and their attacks. The first thing he faced was the barrage of attacks. Boom 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 boom. Under the impact of the small stones that shot out like bullets, the long-distance attacks, whether it was daggers, blades, tires, spiral winds, scorching flames, or gravity fields, all of them exploded in midair like fireworks. Dong 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 dong. The remaining pebbles landed on the close combat mechanical soldiers that were charging toward Noah one after another, triggering a series of muffled sounds that were as heavy as cannon booms. The mechanical soldiers seemed to have been struck by lightning as they were sent flying while spewing out blood. The mechanical soldiers that did not charge out but were attacking from afar were all stunned. Even His Excellency and Li Chingyin, who hadn't made a move, narrowed their eyes in shock. In the end, only one person was not hit by a single pebble, and still managed to rush in front of Noah. Hiya! Zhuo Weiren let out a ferocious roar as he clenched his metal fists tightly. Bang 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 bang. Following a series of loud gunshots, the super metal arm of the bodyguard Zhuo Run ejected bullet shells one after another. That scene was incredibly similar to when Rintaro activated the power of his prosthetic limb. Obviously, Zhuo Weiren and Rintaro were the same type of mechanical soldiers. However, the degree of mechanization was close to 100%, and the enhancement was extremely powerful. Under such circumstances, nearly half of the bullet shells in the prosthetic limb were shot out in succession. The propelling force all turned into substantial attack power, causing Zhuo Weiren's super metal prosthetic limb to swell and shoot out flame-like jets of light that swept across the space like missiles. Go to hell! Zhuo Weiren did not realize that he was the only one attacking, and he threw a punch fiercely. That punch caused the atmosphere to be completely disrupted, and all the pressure was dispelled. With a shocking whistling sound and a sonic boom, it blasted heavily in Noah's direction. In Grunewald's performance test, this attack had even sent a truck flying, and even destroyed a building with a single blow. It was simply unstoppable. Unfortunately, for a real god, this punch was simply too weak to withstand a single blow. In the face of this punch, Noah only raised one hand and faced the super metal fist with his palm. Clang! A dazzling white light flashed in Noah's hand that was extended forward. As soon as Zhuo Wei's fist touched the brilliant white light, it immediately caused the brilliant white light to expand, turning into white lines that spread to the incomparably hard pitch-black arm. Bang! In the next moment, amidst a muffled explosion, the super-thin metal arm that was protecting Zhuo Meng was sliced into cubes of equal size by streams of white lines. It then exploded and turned into fragments. Ah! A blood-curdling scream rang out from Zhuo Wei's mouth. Chapter 2165. Silence. Dead silence. In the entire vast passageway, the mechanical soldiers were either in a daze, their minds blank, or they were lying on the ground, unconscious. Only the agonizing cries of those who were in danger kept ringing out, causing the hearts of the mechanical soldiers to tremble. Your Excellency's heart trembled as well. How is this possible? His Excellency's lips trembled as he whispered. The mechanical soldiers modified by Professor Grunewald, more than 10 of them, are all. They were all defeated in one move. The close combat mechanical soldiers were all wiped out. The long-range attacks of the mechanical soldiers were all neutralized. Even Zhuo Weiren's prosthetic limb was easily shattered by Noah. turning into an incomparably intense pain that assaulted Zhuoyuren's mind, causing him to cry out in agony. How is this possible? His Excellency was shocked. How is this possible? If the mechanical soldiers were so easily defeated, then why did the Five Xiang Association spend so much money to modify Grunewald? Aha! Oblivious to the shock in His Excellency's heart, Bao Weizhuoren hugged his broken arm and screamed miserably. That scream was too mournful. It was as if he had suffered great pain, causing tears to flow out of Zhuo Wei's eyes. Of course, Bao Weizhuo's body was almost 100% mechanized. Except for the head, the rest of the body only looked like a human, but not a real human. Therefore, people with outstanding physical health did not need to eat. They only needed to sleep so that their brain could rest. Naturally, there was no humanized modification like the tear ducts. In view of this, Zhuoruren couldn't even cry. However, it just so happened that the mechanical body of the bodyguard could transmit pain. Even the pain nerves are connected to the mechanical body. It's probably because Grunewald understands that this way, it won't lose its combat instincts and will be able to unleash greater combat power, Noah said with a frown. However, your screams are still too unpleasant to listen to. It's just a broken arm, at least endure it. With that, Noah waved his hand. Buzz. A burst of invisible magic power, transformed into a substantial impact that suddenly appeared and blasted heavily onto Bao Weizhuoren's body. Bang! A muffled sound rang out. Bodyguard Zhuoren, who was still screaming, directly flew out as if he was hit by a truck. He turned into a rolling gourd and rolled several times on the ground before finally stopping. He rubbed against the ground and slid all the way to His Excellency. His Excellency suddenly took a step back as if he had been frightened. The other long-range combat-type mechanical soldiers also seemed to be frightened and subconsciously took a step back. However, as soon as these long-range combat-type mechanical soldiers took a step back, an anomaly occurred. Bam 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 bam. Without any warning, the surrounding walls of the tunnel exploded again and again, causing the walls to explode one after another. Crash. Chains that seemed to be condensed from the purest light drilled out of the exploded rock wall one by one. Like extremely agile pythons, they streaked across the space and shot toward Your Excellency's group. The mechanical soldiers didn't even have time to react. The chains of light drilled out of the rock wall and wrapped around their bodies. In a panic, all the mechanical soldiers were tied up. What is this? Chains. Chains of light. That man, did he set up a trap here long ago? How would the mechanical soldiers know? This was not a trap that had been set up long ago. Instead, Noah turned the magic power in his body into divine power, and poured it into the ground through his feet. Then he let the divine power spread to the surrounding rock walls. Using the characteristics of shaping, it turned into chains of light and broke out of the wall, binding the long-range mechanical soldiers. In the eyes of ordinary people who couldn't see or even sense divine power, it was naturally as if Noah had set up a trap long ago and lured everyone here. As a result, other than Your Excellency, the only person who was not bound by the chains of light was Li Qingyin. As for the close combat mechanical soldiers, other than the bodyguard who was still holding his broken arm and groaning, the rest had all fainted. Your Excellency only felt a chill in his heart. He looked at Noah as if he was looking at a monster. Noah glanced at Li Qingyin and smiled playfully. You're the only one left. Aren't you going to make a move? Li Qingyin was silent. After a while, Li Qingyin let out a low laugh. I'm really convinced. Li Qingyin raised his hand and made a gesture of surrender. I didn't expect you to be more terrifying than I imagined. As expected of someone who holds the ownership of the world in the palm of his hand, this Five Xiang Association is completely incomparable. I surrender. Hearing Li Qingyin's words, Your Excellency's face turned pale. Surrender? Noah continued to glance at Li Qingyin. His playful smile gradually disappeared as he spoke indifferently. Are you really going to surrender? What else can I do? Li Qingyin raised his hand and shrugged. All I want is war, but the Five Xiang Association can't fight against you at all. Moreover, it's already at the end of the road. It's impossible for me to achieve my goal. Since that's the case, I have no reason to continue working for others. That's naturally for the best. Noah looked deeply at Li Qingyin, then suddenly smiled. However, you're the only one who's surrendering, right? Just as Noah's voice fell, a petite figure suddenly rushed out from his side and rushed towards Noah at an extremely fast speed. You're not allowed to bully my father. Li Qingyin Jr., whose eyes had turned scarlet, rushed to Noah's side as if he had gone mad. The odachi in his hand exploded, causing a large area of blade light to burst forth. In the next moment, a storm of slashes cut through the air and directly covered Noah's direction. At this moment, a faint sound pierced through the air. Behind Your Excellency's group, another petite figure flashed over at an astonishing speed. Without even Li Qingyin noticing, she flashed over Your Excellency's head like a stream of light and flashed to Noah's side. Immediately, a sniper rifle as heavy as a hammer was swung from top to bottom, fiercely swinging towards the storm of slashes. Clang! Following the crisp sound of metal clashing, the heavy sniper rifle and the sharp odachi collided, causing bright sparks to fly. Only then did Li Qingyin Jr. notice. There was one more person in front of him. There was one more person who had caused Li Qingyin Jr. to be unable to sleep at night. Tina! Li Qingyin Jr. called out. You want to hurt Big Brother? Tina's eyes were also scarlet as she looked directly at Li Qingyin Jr., appearing extremely cold. That's impossible. Ah! Beneva Leech immediately brandished his odachi like a madman. He didn't even pay attention to Noah as he attacked Tina, like a madman. In response, Tina didn't advance but instead retreated, as if she was deliberately luring Li Qingyin Jr. away from Noah's side. Her figure leaped and immediately pulled away from Li Qingyin Jr. Li Qingyin Jr. chased after her without any hesitation. Li Qingyin Jr., who was known to be invincible in close combat, obviously hadn't recovered from the blow of being cleanly defeated by Tina in close combat last time. He had developed an abnormal obsession with Tina. Li Qingyin Jr. Li Qingyin hurriedly shouted. However, just as he shouted this, a chain of light flashed at extreme speed and heavily whipped Li Qingyin's body like a shadow of a whip. Bang! Li Qingyin Jr. didn't know how many muffled sounds were heard, but he was directly sent flying and heavily slammed into a rock wall. His head tilted to the side, and there was no more movement. Bang! Another muffled sound was heard. However, this time Noah, who had appeared in front of Li Qingyin Jr., stepped on Li Qingyin Jr.'s chest, causing Li Qingyin Jr. to let out a painful howl. Then, Noah raised his head and looked in front of him. Your Excellency was less than half a meter away from Noah. Everyone suddenly went silent, looking at Noah, who was looking at him with a mocking expression. Your Excellency only felt that his body temperature was rapidly decreasing, and his whole body was ice cold. Chapter 2166. Ugh ugh. Bodyguard was groan became the only sound in the passageway as his chest was stomped on. Noah and Your Excellency looked at each other from less than half a meter away. One had a calm expression from beginning to end, while the other felt cold all over. In fact, the mood of the two was indeed at two extremes. For Noah, after finding the hiding place of His Excellency and the others, the outcome of this operation had already been decided, and it would be difficult for him to have any suspense. For Your Excellency, the Wuxiang Association, which was originally regarded as a glory, was forced to the point of destruction. This fact was perfectly interpreted by the scene of mechanical soldiers lying on the ground or being firmly bound. Despair had already emerged in Your Excellency's heart. Your Excellency didn't even have the urge to escape. In the current situation, Your Excellency couldn't escape. The exit in front had been blocked by Noah. The police in the rear passage were chasing after him. The mechanical soldiers around him were all defeated. Not a single trump card was left in his hand. The only thing Your Excellency could rely on now was the gun in his hand. However, the gun used for self-defense, even at such a close distance, probably couldn't cause any harm to Noah, right? Therefore, Your Excellency just held the gun, and his hand couldn't help but tremble. Seeing this scene clearly, Noah glanced at Your Excellency's face under the black hood, then reached out his hand and slowly took the gun in Your Excellency's hand. Your Excellency couldn't even squeeze out the strength to resist. The gun in his hand was almost taken by Noah without any resistance. Noah said in a casual tone as he twirled his pistol, and twirled it nimbly. Don't you want to say something? Your Excellency? Your Excellency? Your Excellency said self-deprecatingly. Haven't you already guessed my identity? Still calling me Your Excellency? Then, I'll change the way I call you. Noah said faintly. Even at this point, you don't plan to surrender? Zihengxiani. When this name appeared in this space, a heavy atmosphere immediately filled the air. His Excellency lowered his head. After a while he reached out and took off the hood on his head. The face that appeared under the hood was a familiar face. The person who had previously provided Noah with clues about Saiwu Zhongshuan's whereabouts in the coffee shop was Mugging and Rintaro's nominal guardian, the former butler of the Tendo family, who had once declared that he wanted to become the next ruler of Tokyo Uzhang Senichi. When Zihengxiani stared at Noah. When did you notice my identity? Just as you planned to lure me into the Self-Defense Forces military camp, wanting the entire military camp to be turned into ashes with me. Noah met Ziheng's gaze. Didn't you tell me on the phone that time? Outside the Self-Defense Forces barracks, Noah said such a sentence when he was talking to His Excellency after getting rid of Toshiro Akiyama. There is only one reason why I came out of the holy residence. That's right. That day, there was only one reason why Noah came out of the holy residence, followed Saiwu Zhongshuan's trail, and was lured into the Self-Defense Forces military camp. That was Zihengxiani. Mugging had given the task of monitoring Saiwu Zhongshuan to Zihengxiani. That day, after Zihengxiani spoke with Mugging, he asked Noah to come out and meet him directly. The plan to lure me into the Self-Defense Forces military camp was closely linked. Although it wasn't very clever, it was almost flawless. Such a plan had to start with luring me out, and having me follow Saiwu Zhongshuan. Noah said. If I didn't know who Saiwu Zhongshuan was meeting outside, and went to the Central Control and Development Agency to investigate the surveillance footage, then discovered Soma Myunhai's existence, and changed my target to the Self-Defense Forces military camp, then it wouldn't have succeeded. That's true. Zihengxiani's self-deprecating expression became more and more obvious. In order to lure you to the Self-Defense Forces military camp, it was absolutely necessary to let you notice Soma Myunhai's existence. Since that was the case, as long as you thought about who was the reason why you went to look for Soma Myunhai, then you could basically determine who wanted you dead. The person who made Noah notice Soma Myunhai's existence and go to the Self-Defense Forces military camp was Zihengxiani. Zihengxiani used a photo as an excuse to lure Noah out. Then he asked Noah to investigate the surveillance footage and look for Soma Myunhai. This was all part of the plan. I also thought that Saiwu Zhongshuan might be the only one acting. That dictator might know that I sent someone to watch him, so he directed and acted out this scene to make me notice Soma Myunhai. Noah said leisurely. However, when I confirmed that Soma Myunhai was just being used, I was sure that Saiwu Zhongshuan absolutely couldn't direct and act alone. He must have a helper. If Soma Myunhai was really a spy, then Saiwu Zhongshuan might have directed and acted out this scene himself. But Soma Myunhai was just being used and he was innocent. In that case, as the commander of the self-defense forces in Tokyo, it was impossible for this high-ranking guy not to understand what it meant to secretly meet with the ruler of Osaka. It meant that others had sufficient reason to suspect that the two had been secretly in contact with each other. If things went wrong, he would be charged with treason. Therefore, even if Saiwu Zhongshuan wanted to secretly meet with Soma Myunhai, he couldn't do it. Unless Saiwu Zhongshuan has a helper who is capable enough to have a relationship with Soma Myunhai and ask Soma Myunhai to come out. Noah looked at Zihengxiani and smiled slightly. This helper, if he runs the pie metal business, don't you think he has enough channels to know Soma Myunhai? Soma Myunhai was the commander of the self-defense forces. Since it was the self-defense forces, wouldn't it be natural for him to buy enough pie metal weapons to deal with animals? Zihengxiani himself said that because of the pie metal business, he had many channels. Therefore, Zihengxiani and Soma Myunhai were already acquainted. Relying on your business channels, you even have the guts to participate in the election of the next ruler of Tokyo. You must know a lot of big shots, and it's impossible that Soma Munikyo, the commander of the self-defense forces, doesn't know you. Noah continued to play with the gun in his hand and said casually, "Plus your ambition. It's hard for people not to suspect you, Mr. Ziheng." "Just a suspicion?" Ziheng Xianyi opened his eyes wide. "Just a suspicion. And you're sure that I'm you? Even if I'm not sure, so what?" Noah curled his lips and smiled. "Anyway, in the end, I will definitely catch you and personally take off your hood. Then there's no need for evidence. Just suspicion is enough." Ziheng Xianyi was immediately speechless. Then Ziheng Xianyi laughed again. "What a good shelter for the cursed child." Ziheng Xianyi laughed in an extremely bleak manner. "This time, I admit defeat. You are indeed very powerful. Losing to someone like you is not an injustice." As soon as he finished speaking, "Not an injustice?" Noah raised his head and stared at Ziheng Xianyi. His pitch-black eyes were filled with an astonishingly cold light. "That's right. You're not wronged. But what about the many members of Fairyland who died because of your senseless ambitions?" At this moment, an earth-shattering pressure bore down on Ziheng's body, as though gravity had descended from the heavens. Ziheng Xianyi held his breath and felt as if he was being stared at by a ferocious beast. A sense of terror rose in his heart. Poor Ziheng Xianyi. Although he was the top operatives of the Wuxiang Association, he did not have much combat ability. Suppressed by Noah's aura, Ziheng Xian could not even tremble. He could only watch on with a look of horror in his eyes. The surrounding mechanical soldiers that were firmly bound by the chains of light were also affected. Sensing the terrifying pressure in the air, all the mechanical soldiers looked at Noah in horror. The blood in their faces started to fade bit by bit. As for Zhuoren, who was under Noah's foot and could not even turn around, his face was filled with horror. His whole body was trembling, and he almost lost control of his bladder. Then Noah slowly raised the gun in his hand and pointed it at Ziheng Xianyi's head. Ziheng Xianyi's pupils shrank to the size of a needle. Chapter 2167. If it was said that Noah and Ziheng Xian had the idea of sparing his life if he surrendered, then now, Noah really had the intention to kill him. Under the targeting of the Five Xiang Association, in the past year, the police officers under the fairy tale really did suffer casualties. Of course, according to Noah's understanding, there were more people who were injured, but fewer who actually died. After all, Fairyland had an extremely strict exclusion policy against outsiders. Only those who sincerely accepted the cursed child would be allowed to live in Fairyland. The rest would not be allowed the right to live there. At most they would be allowed to enter the country. Moreover, this group of people who entered the country must be people who did not reject the cursed child. In this regard, Mugging used the system that Noah used to test facilitators to select facilitators who could partner with the cursed child in Fairyland to form a police force, and exclude those who had ulterior motives or pretended to accept the cursed child. Because of this, Fairyland had always been so peaceful, and had not been infiltrated by the Wuxiang Association. Since that was the case, even if the Wuxiang Association wanted to target the police officers of Fairy Tale, they could only do so in a foreign country. As for the police officers who could carry out missions abroad, they had to at least reach the level of Grade A police officers. Police officers of this level were all elites in the top 1,000 on the IP ranking. Therefore, even if the Wuxiang Association targeted them, it would not be easy to kill elites of this level. However, in the year of targeting, there were still a few police officers who died in the hands of the Wuxiang Association, while the rest fled back to Fairyland with serious injuries. When he thought of this, the pity and consideration in Noah's heart completely disappeared without a trace. Even I, Fairy Tale, have a few police officers who died because of your ambitions. Then how many people have died because of your ambitions? Noah stared at Ziheng Xianyi's face that changed abruptly, and a fierce light flashed in his eyes. You can go to hell and make amends. With that, Noah was about to pull the trigger. Pa-dash. At this moment, a hand suddenly reached out and grabbed the gun that was pointed at Ziheng Xianyi's head. Noah frowned. He turned his head and looked to the side. Mu Geng was clutching Noah's gun tightly. Her head was lowered, and her bangs covered her pretty face. No one could see her current expression. At the same time, Rintaro led the police force and chased after them from the other side of the passage. They only stopped when they saw the scene in front of them. Megan-san. Ryutaru instantly understood the current situation and fell silent. Pairs of police officers belonging to Fairy Tale looked at each other, as if they did not understand the current situation. However, they did not raise any questions and just watched quietly. Noah's frown deepened as he looked at Mugung, whose expression could not be seen clearly. It was only then that Mugung spoke in a low voice. "Leave him to me." Hearing this, Noah did not say anything. He only stared at Mugung. After a while he sighed and lowered the gun in his hand. "Thank you," Mugung said in a voice that only Noah could hear. She immediately moved and stood in front of Ziheng Xieni. Mugung raised her head and looked at Ziheng Xieni expressionlessly. "Why?" "No reason." Ziheng Xieni was silent for a moment, and then said indifferently, "You have your dreams, we have our dreams. That's all." "Is that so?" Mugung bit her lips and stared at Ziheng Xieni. "For your dreams, it doesn't matter how many people are sacrificed?" "Sacrifice?" Ziheng Xieni gave a sarcastic smile and gave such an answer. "If it's necessary." This sentence did not provoke Mugung. Instead, it provoked Rintaro. "If it's necessary, then we can sacrifice." Rintaro shouted at Ziheng Xieni. "Are you such a person? Why can't I be such a person? Do you really think I'm a kind-hearted guardian?" Ziheng Xieni laughed. "If that's the case, then it's time for you to wake up. The reason why I'm your guardian in name is because you have a deep grudge against the Tintong family. Moreover, you have great potential. You can become two good swords in my hands. Especially you, Tintong Mugung." Ziheng Xieni said to Mugung word by word. "Your talent can be said to be peerless. Even when you were young, you showed extremely terrifying blade skills. I have seen you fight several times. The average initiator is not your opponent at all. At that time, I thought that when you grow up, you will definitely be able to help me deal with the Tiantong family. If I want to become the ruler of Tokyo, the Tentong family must be eliminated. Otherwise, with the Tentong family that controls almost the entire political scene in Tokyo, there's no way I can become the ruler." Ziheng Xieni shook his head. "It's a pity that plans can't keep up with changes. I didn't expect that the Tentong family that I've been trying to deal with for so long would be destroyed by a civilian organization that was founded less than a few years ago. I was really surprised at that time. Of course, what surprised me even more was your growth." Ziheng Xieni's gaze swept across Mugung and Rintaro. One became the acting president of Fairyland, another became the leader of Fairyland's tour group, one ranked in the top 3 of the IP rankings, while the other ranked in the top 10 of the IP rankings. I never imagined that all of you could achieve such accomplishments. However, this has made me realize that I was right in choosing to become your guardians back then. You guys have such great potential. If you could come to my side, you would definitely become my right-hand men." Ziheng Xieni laughed. "Unfortunately, plans can't keep up with changes. You've completely integrated into Fairyland. There's no way for you to come to my side. I have no choice but to eliminate you." That was why Ziheng Xieni sent Li Qingyin and Yoshihito Zhua to lead a group of terrorists to attack the holy abode in an attempt to kill Mugung. Right from the beginning, Ziheng Xieni was only acting for his own ambition. "You?" Rintaro's anger surged. "You bastard." Under the control of his anger, Rintaro pointed his gun at Ziheng Xieni. However, before Rintaro could make a move, a cold gleam of a blade flashed across the space. Slash. Accompanied by a tearing sound like silk, blood suddenly appeared. Ziheng Xieni's chest was slashed open by the sharp blade, and a large amount of blood spurted out. Blood stained the ground, the walls, and Ziheng Xieni's entire body. Ziheng Xieni's eyes widened. A sharp pain struck Ziheng Xieni's mind. Ziheng Xieni looked at Mugung in disbelief. All he saw was Mugung holding the long blade that he had unsheathed. His exquisite doll-like face stared emotionlessly at Ziheng Xieni, and his red lips moved slightly. "You plotted against me and plotted against Rikikuan. On account of the fact that you raised me and took me in, I can write it off," Mugung said coldly. "However, you killed the police of Fairy Tale, as well as my subordinates and companions. I will use your life to pay for it." With that, Mugung raised the long blade in his hand again and slashed mercilessly. Slash. A large amount of blood splattered everywhere for the second time. Bam! Ziheng Xianyi fell to the ground, and the blood that flowed out from his body formed a pool, staining the ground red. Your Excellency! Your Excellency! Lord Ziheng! The mechanical soldiers that were chained up by the chains cried out in pain. Noah saw this scene with his own eyes and sighed again. Then he turned his gaze to his feet. No, no. Yoshihito screamed in fear. Let me go! Let me go! Yoshihito, who had once felt ashamed of falling into Noah's hands, once again begged for mercy, just like 3 years ago. In response, Noah only pressed the muzzle of his gun against Yoshihito's head. No! As Yoshihito screamed in pain, Noah shot out the bullet that had been infused with shattering magic. The super metal head and the protozoa's head exploded into pieces and scattered all over the ground. Then Noah turned around and ordered, "Bring the rest of the mechanical soldiers back." At this point, the crusade had come to an end. Chapter 2168. Tokyo District 1, International Hotel. In one of the hotel rooms, Mugung stood by the window, looking at the streets below. Undoubtedly, her delicate doll-like face did not carry any expression, but it gave off a very sad feeling. The sun shone through the window and shone on Muging's body, covering the girl's body with a layer of golden gauze. The girl did not notice this at all. She just kept looking at the scenery outside the window. Even her eyes were a little unfocused, as if she had lost her soul. Ever since returning to the hotel, Mugung had been like this. She had been like this for at least 4 to 5 hours. During this process, Mugung did not move at all, not even blinking her eyes. It was as if she was no longer here, leaving only a shell. And obviously, the girl would continue to be like this if she was not interrupted. At a certain moment, a hand suddenly reached out from behind Mugung and pressed a can of cold drink to Muging's face. Ah! Mugung cried out in surprise and finally woke up. She subconsciously turned her head and looked behind her. There, a very familiar person appeared out of nowhere and smiled at Mugung. Noah. Mugung was surprised. Why are you here? To see you. Noah threw the cold drink in his hand to Mugung. However, no matter how I knocked, you didn't respond, so I just came in myself. Hearing this, Mugung was speechless as she took the cold drink. If she remembered correctly, she should have locked the door when she came in, right? In other words, did Noah pick the lock? Can you not always think of violence? Noah seemed to have seen through Muging's thoughts and rolled his eyes. Do I look like someone who can pick a lock? So far, Noah had never picked a lock. Because for Noah, instead of going through the trouble of picking a lock, it was more useful to just kick it. Of course, if he made that kind of noise, Mugung should have noticed it no matter how dumb she was. She would not have been unaware until Noah came in, and even came to her side. Therefore, Mugung asked doubtfully, "Then how did you get in?" "Of course I'll directly ask someone to unlock it," Noah said matter-of-factly. "This is a hotel, not your personal room. Can't you just ask a waiter to get the spare key?" Such a simple reason left Mugung dumbfounded. "Alright, don't look at me like that." Noah laughed. "I've brought a gift." With that said, Noah lifted a bag in his hand. "I just went shopping with Tina, Yanju, and Xiashi and bought some burgers." Noah waved the bag in his hand. "You should be hungry, right? Hamburger?" Mugung blinked and said, "No, I'm not hungry." Before he could finish his sentence, a loud gulp sound came from Mugung's body. The corners of Noah's mouth twitched. Mugung's pretty face turned red. "Really?" Noah glanced at Mugung's stomach that made the sound and said with a half-smile, "Since you're not hungry, then forget it, I'll eat it myself." After that, Noah took out a burger from the bag. However, the burger, just as it was taken out of the bag, immediately disappeared with a swoosh sound. Noah looked at his empty hand with a speechless expression. In front of Noah, Mugung returned to her initial state. She leaned against the window and looked outside, her expression still unchanged. Of course, the feeling of sadness at the beginning was completely gone. After all, a girl eating a burger with puffed cheeks, no matter how you look at it, it is impossible for a girl to have a sad atmosphere. Noah was almost defeated by such a powerful girl. After shaking his head in annoyance, Noah also came to the window, leaned against the wall, and looked at the scenery outside with Mugung. As if chatting, he said this sentence. What were you thinking just now? Mugung silently swallowed the hamburger in his mouth, and continued to nibble on it as he spoke faintly. You and Ricky Kuan already knew that Mr. Ziheng was one of the top operatives of Wuxiang Association, right? Not really. Noah bitterly smiled. I also only knew about it on the day of the incident at the Self-Defense Forces camp. Ricky Kuan guessed it based on my words. But that day was the day you first met Mr. Ziheng. Mugung questioned. Doesn't that mean you knew from the beginning? But I was just guessing. Noah looked at Mugung. I didn't directly confirm that Mr. Ziheng was one of the top operatives of Wuxiang Association. Then why didn't you tell me? Mugung's voice became a little low. Ricky Kuan must have told you not to tell me, right? I didn't want to tell you. Noah sighed. I just didn't want you to think too much. No matter what, the reason why Ziheng Xiani was able to lure Noah out was because he had used Mugung. Before the international conference began, Mugung asked Mr. Ziheng to spy on Chiwu Zhongshuan, and gave Mr. Ziheng a chance to lure Noah out. If not, Mr. Ziheng wouldn't have used Mugung's mouth to meet Noah in the coffee shop and lure Noah into a trap. Therefore, strictly speaking, Mugung had helped Zihengxian a little. I don't want you to think that you almost killed me. Noah looked at Mugung. This idea. It shouldn't be a groundless fear, right? Mugung was speechless. After a while, Mugung's expression became a little gloomy. Actually, I should have guessed that Mr. Ziheng is from Wuxiang Association, Mugung said in a low voice. Ever since I left Tokyo and moved to Fairyland, Mr. Ziheng didn't contact me often. It wasn't until a year ago when Fairyland's existence was completely exposed that Mr. Ziheng contacted me again, and very frequently. At first, I just thought that Mr. Ziheng didn't contact me because he didn't know where I was and thought that I might be on some mission. After all, I'm also a police officer. Mugung bit his lip. Now that I think about it, the reason why Mr. Ziheng didn't contact me again was because the Tentong family had been eradicated. He didn't need to use me to deal with the Tentong family, so he simply gave up on me. Ricky Kuan probably did the same. After Fairyland was exposed, Mr. Ziheng knew that I was the acting president of Fairyland, so he contacted me again. The reason is probably because he recognized the threat of Fairyland and wanted to get information from me and use me again. Mugung said self-deprecatingly. Mr. Ziheng even asked me to let him set up a company in Fairyland, specializing in transporting pi metal for Fairyland's use. However, at that time, I had already adopted the system you left behind. For the sake of the children, I couldn't easily let those who rejected the cursed child enter, so I used that as a reason to reject Mr. Ziheng's request. Mugung looked somewhat regretful. Now that I think about it, if I had opened the back door for Mr. Ziheng to set up a company in Fairyland because of our friendship, then that company would have become a channel for Wuxiang Association to infiltrate Fairyland, right? But you didn't do that. Noah looked straight at Mugung. If that's the case, then there's no need to blame yourself. I'm just thinking, in this year the police officers of our guild who were killed by the people of the Five Xiang Association, is it possible that it was because of me? Mugung's emotions seemed to have started to become agitated. Only the higher-ups of the guild would know the contents of the missions that required them to go abroad. Others wouldn't know at all, but Wuxiang Association could target those police officers who went abroad for missions. Could it be that I accidentally exposed their whereabouts to Mr. Ziheng? That's why I've been thinking hard here, thinking about how much information I've told Mr. Ziheng about Fairyland and the guild over the phone this year. Mugung's voice began to have a slight sob. But I just can't remember because in this year, I've talked to Mr. Ziheng a lot of times, and the number of words we've spoken is uncountable. I don't even know when I've leaked the information. That was why Mugung was in a daze. In this year, Mugung had indeed contacted Ziheng Xian a lot of times. If that was the case, it was only natural that Ziheng Xian would have gotten some information from him at some point in time. Chapter 2169. Seeing that Mugung seemed to be getting more and more agitated, Noah looked straight into the girl's eyes, his gaze unusually serious. Under the gaze of that pair of deep, dark eyes, Mugging was slightly startled, and then unbelievably calmed down. Then Noah spoke. I can understand how you feel, and I know that your considerations are not without reason, but you can't just dismiss it like that. Noah looked at Mugung and said, there are so many police officers in our guild. Even the number of grade A police officers who can go abroad to carry out missions is close to 700 to 800. With this number of police officers, let's assume that half of them have taken on missions abroad. That's 300 to 400 police officers. You are the acting guild master of Fairyland, so you must be focused on a lot of work this year, like the development and construction of the city, the guild system and leadership, as well as the arrangement and placement of the cursed child, and so on. Noah smiled. With so many things to do, I don't think you have the ability to pay attention to what kind of missions 300 to 400 police officers have taken on, where they are going, and even reveal them to Zhengxian. But, Mugging seemed to want to say something, but was interrupted by Noah. There are no buts. Noah said with an extremely firm tone. Although I don't know the real situation, Xiaoshi has always been by your side to assist you. With Xiaoshi's supervision, no one in the guild would believe that you would use your precious time to reveal information to Zhengxian, let alone me. Even if that's the case, I might have revealed other information. Mugging lowered her head and said softly. And that information would cause some degree of damage to Fairyland. In other words, you must think that you are right just because you are wrong. Noah sighed. Don't go into a dead end. You are my acting guild master. If you continue to be so depressed, how can I leave in peace? Leave? Mugging suddenly raised her head and looked at Noah in shock. You're leaving? Don't look like the sky is falling. I won't be gone for another 3 years. Noah shook his head, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Just treat it as I have a mission to carry out. I won't be gone for too long, at most a month. A month? Mugging finally breathed a sigh of relief. Of course, Mugging did not know that this month might never come. If I can defeat the Eye, then no matter how long has passed, I can return in a month. And if I can't, all worlds would die with Noah, including Mugung, Elian, including those people whom Noah met in the worlds he had been to. Thinking of this, Noah took a deep breath, suppressed the complicated emotions in his heart, and patted Mugung on the shoulder. You're no longer the president of the civilian police company that doesn't even have a business, but the acting guild master of Fairyland. Millions of people and children in Fairyland are waiting for you to take care of them, Noah said to Mugung. So, I won't allow you to wallow in meaningless self-blame. Don't forget, you're the same. Mugging finally showed a somewhat spirited smile. Fairyland has always been your possession, and I'm at best your acting guild master. Don't think of being a hands-off boss. If you don't return in a month, I'll start to usurp the throne and completely remove the word acting, so that you can only starve. It's fine. Noah curled his lips into a smile. When that time comes, I'll go to the alien and let her take care of me. That's an ambitious decision. Mugging was speechless, but quickly reacted. Speaking of the alien, does she know that you're planning to go on a mission? Not yet. Noah shrugged. I plan to tell her after the Five Xiang Association is completely captured. After the Five Xiang Association is completely captured. Mugging seemed to understand. In other words, yeah. Noah turned around and looked out the window again. After the Five Xiang Association matter is over, it's almost time for me to leave. Hearing that, Mugging looked straight at Noah. Looking at Noah's expression as if he could go to a very distant place at any time, Mugging's eyes flickered, and no one knew what he was thinking. In the room, the initial sad atmosphere had completely disappeared. It was replaced by a burst of sadness. A burst of faint sadness. In the end, it seemed that even the world didn't intend to let Noah stay for too long. After the conversation between Noah and Mugung, another month passed, and the police from Fairy Tale sent to the other 4 areas of the Nippon Islands began to return. The results of this big operation were gratifying. In the Five Xiang Association, there was a top operative responsible for one area, lurking in Tokyo, Osaka, Sendai, Bodo and Sapporo. Although the ultimate goal of the Five Xiang Association was world hegemony, their first goal was naturally to start from the 5 major areas of Nippon. After years of planning, out of the 5 top operatives, 2 of them became the rulers of their respective areas. One was Saiwamyu Nikika, who became the ruler of the Osaka area. The other was called Tatsutsuji Tsukihiko, who became the ruler of the Sapporo area, which was the Hokkaido area. Among them, Saiwamyu Nikika was killed by Noah. Tatsutsuji Tsukihiko tenaciously resisted, but in the end he couldn't resist the powerful fairy tale. He was first forced to step down and then arrested. As for the other 3 top operatives, other than Ziheng Senichi, who was executed by Mugung, the other 2 were also forced into a dead end by the police of Fairy Tale. One was killed, and the other was arrested, and there was no way for them to turn the situation around. In the end, even the whereabouts of Grunewald were discovered by Noah. He sent out Rintaro, Hina, Yenju and 300 A-class police to arrest him, and engaged in a battle to the death with numerous mechanical soldiers. The result of the battle was that Fairy Tale, who was fully equipped with artificial artifacts, naturally couldn't lose. They destroyed Grunewald's stronghold, and captured the world's strongest brain alive, and sent him to the prison of Fairyland. In addition to the Fairy Tale's comprehensive operations in various areas, the spies of the 5 Xiong Association were all dug out. It could be said that the current 5 Xiong Association was almost completely finished. All the top operatives above 2 wings were captured. Many of the lower-level members of 1 wing escaped, but members of this level were all small fries. They were equivalent to followers and slaves in the 5 Xiong Association. Even if they escaped, they couldn't do anything. After 2 months of operations, this organization that attempted to gain world hegemony was completely destroyed. Although because of this, the 5 areas of the Japanese archipelago were also in chaos, but in the end, they all calmed down. For example, in the Tokyo area, the Metropolitan Police Department and the self-defense forces that were paralyzed because of the 5 Xiong Association had recovered their functions, and the Tokyo area gradually returned to normal. All the countries in the world knew that in these 2 months, an evil organization was completely annihilated by Noah's thunderous operations. However, this operation, in the eyes of all the countries in the world, was like a warning from Fairy Tale. Therefore, all the countries in the world hurriedly expedited the transfer of the cursed children to Fairyland to avoid being used as a pretext. As a result, the transfer of the cursed children from all over the world was finally completed in 2 months. Now, except for Fairyland, there were no more cursed children in the rest of the countries. Of course, without the cursed children, the police were also gone. Just like what Weiji said, the police had become the exclusive power of Fairyland, and under the influence of Fairyland, the world would begin to truly recognize it. Understand the meaning of the phrase, the police are the last hope of humanity. Until this moment, Noah's original dream was realized. From today onwards, the cursed children would no longer be ostracized and despised. At least, in Fairyland, these children could definitely live a happy life. Noah had no more regrets in this world. In other words, it was time to leave. Chapter 2170. The night was getting darker and darker. In the holy residence, the Holy Son was sitting in front of his desk as usual, seriously reading the documents in his hand. For the Holy Son who longed for peace, working through the night was a very common thing. Recently, Tokyo had been in a lot of trouble because of the 5 Xiong Association. The Holy Son naturally hoped to work harder to restore peace in Tokyo as soon as possible. Therefore, the Holy Son was constantly reading the documents, causing a lot of documents to pile up on his desk. However, even so, there were still a lot of documents waiting for the Holy Son to read, piling up on the other side of the desk. The Holy Son kept reading the documents like this, as if he didn't notice how late it was. In fact, these documents didn't need to be read by tomorrow, but it would take a few days of work to finish. With the Holy Son's current reading speed, there was no need to rush at all, it would be finished sooner or later. However, the Holy Son had no intention of stopping at all, and had been working hard all the time. At this rate, the Holy Son of Heaven wouldn't stop until it was late at night, right? If it was in the past, the Holy Son would definitely work hard until late at night without anyone looking after him. Unfortunately, for the past 2 months, There was someone who had been watching over this hard-working girl and supervising her when she went to bed. And now, this person came as usual, and before the Holy Son noticed, he reached out from behind and took away the document he was reading. The Holy Son was startled at first, but immediately understood what was going on, and the serious expression on his face began to relax. However, someone wouldn't let it go so easily. Bang! Along with the sound of knocking, the hand holding the document hit Elysian Son of Heaven's head hard. Ah! The Holy Son couldn't help but cry out in pain, holding his head, and turned his eyes angrily, looking behind him. There, Noah was holding the document the Holy Son was reading, staring at the Holy Son, and said in a somewhat unfriendly tone, "How many times do I have to tell you? Are you still planning to work through the night?" The Holy Son was speechless, and looked a little guilty. I just want to work a little longer." "A little while?" Noah looked at Elysian Son of Heaven with a thoughtful expression. "Is it really only for a short while?" "It really only took a short while." The Holy Son of Heaven's gaze began to shift. "The one you're holding, I plan to end it after reading it. Is that so?" Noah smiled and raised the document in his hand. "But I don't believe it." After he said that, Noah forcefully knocked the Holy Son of Heaven's head, causing the Holy Son of Heaven to let out a soft cry. The Holy Son of Heaven held his head and looked at Noah as if he had been wronged. If the people in the Tokyo area knew that the Holy and Pure Son of Heaven was actually acting like a little girl, they would definitely be scared out of their wits, right? On the other hand, Noah was already used to how the Holy Son behaved in private. When they first started dating, the Holy Son of Heaven wasn't like this. He was no longer as pure and holy in front of Noah. At most, he would blush from time to time. However, after 2 months of dating, although Noah and the Holy Son of Heaven were always busy during the day, one was busy with the matters in Fairyland, the other was busy with the matters in the Tokyo area, dutifully performing their duties as rulers. But when it came to night time, the two of them got along like lovers. Of course, the Holy Son of Heaven became more and more defenseless in front of Noah, and from time to time he would act like a little girl, which could really make a lot of people's jaws drop to the ground. Looking at the Holy Son of Heaven's somewhat angry look, Noah felt that it was funny, but also felt that it was funny. After throwing the document in his hand on the desk, he reached out and pulled the Holy Son of Heaven up. Then Noah sat on the Holy Son of Heaven's seat, and then pulled the Holy Son of Heaven into his arms, letting the ruler of Tokyo sit on his lap. The Holy Son of Heaven's face was slightly red, but he did not resist, and just twisted his body a few times as if he was not used to it. Pa-dash! In the next second, a crisp sound came from behind the Holy Son of Heaven. "Ah!" The Holy Son of Heaven exclaimed again, and covered his butt, his face completely red. Noah smiled playfully, shrugged and said so. "Don't move, let me hug you for a while." I didn't say you can't hug me." The Holy Son of Heaven's face was red, and protested with a mosquito-like voice. "Why did you hit me there? Who asked you to be dishonest?" Noah looked at the Holy Son of Heaven with a smile, and said somewhat dangerously, "If you don't listen to me, I'll continue to hit you." The Holy Son of Heaven immediately covered his butt, and shook his head with a red face, which made Noah really have the urge to continue hitting him. Fortunately, Noah's moral integrity was not lacking, and the Holy Son of Heaven was lucky enough to escape this calamity. "You." The smile on Noah's face gradually disappeared, and he lovingly pinched the Holy Son of Heaven's little nose. "Next time, you can't work too late, okay?" Hearing Noah's words, the redness on the Holy Son of Heaven's face faded bit by bit, and the girlish appearance that only Noah could see also began to disappear without a trace. After a moment of silence, the Holy Son of Heaven spoke softly. "Are you planning to leave?" "Yes." Noah did not hide and nodded. After all, the international conference is over, the problems of the world have been solved, the military forces in the Tokyo area are back in action, and even the Wuxiang Association has been completely captured. I should return to Fairyland. Hearing this, the Holy Son of Heaven nodded, and his expression did not change much. After all, the Holy Son of Heaven understood Noah's position very well. As the president of Fairyland, Noah could not always stay in the Tokyo area, and would always need to return to fairyland. Today, as the largest independent country in the world, and also carrying the hope of all humans in the world, fairyland's position in the world has long been extraordinary. Under such circumstances, with Noah's ability, he would definitely be able to lead fairyland and bring a bright future for humans. This was the future that the Holy Son of Heaven hoped to see. The future that he had hoped to see before he became the Holy Son of Heaven. However, in the past, the Holy Son of Heaven had never found a way to walk towards this future. And while he hated his own powerlessness, he could only sigh. Now, the man he loved had realized the Holy Son of Heaven's dream, which made the Holy Son of Heaven overjoyed. To put it bluntly, the Holy Son of Heaven was proud of Noah. And as the ruler of a country, the Holy Son of Heaven naturally understood Noah as well. As such, the Holy Son of Heaven naturally could not bind Noah to a small Tokyo area. The stage of this man that she loved was not the Tokyo area, but the world. With that in mind, the Holy Son of Heaven's eyes still showed some reluctance. Seeing this clearly, Noah hugged the holy girl in his arms and said, "Don't worry, I will be back." The Holy Son of Heaven nodded, his eyes never leaving Noah. "When are you leaving?" "Tomorrow." Noah answered directly. "I will take a special plane back to fairyland early in the morning." In other words, tomorrow Noah and the Holy Son of Heaven would not have time to meet. Farewell tonight. The Holy Son of Heaven clenched his hands as he thought of this. Looking at Noah's face, his heart began to beat faster. "You." The Holy Son of Heaven's face blushed again as he spoke in a low voice. "Do you still remember what I said to you when you left 3 years ago?" 3 years ago? Noah was confused. Which one? That one. The Holy Son of Heaven's voice became lower and lower as his face became redder and redder. "My confidants in the sanctuary have been urging me to give birth to a child as soon as possible." "This one?" Noah was enlightened. "Of course I remember this." Before he could finish, Noah's face froze as he looked at the Holy Son of Heaven in shock. Then Noah smiled. There was really no more direct hint than this. The Holy Son of Heaven screamed for the umpteenth time. But this time, it was Noah who carried the Holy Son of Heaven in a princess carry and walked towards the bed. The Holy Son of Heaven's face became redder than ever as he buried his head in Noah's arms. Not long after, a pure white wedding dress floated to the ground. The night gradually blurred. Chapter 2171. The next morning, warm sunlight shone in through the window and onto the room, reflecting a hazy glow. Noah slowly put on his coat. After tidying up his clothes, he picked up the white wedding dress that had fallen on the ground and placed it on the hanger at the side. After doing all this, Noah turned his head and looked forward. Phew! The rhythmic sound of breathing could be heard. Under the blankets, one could vaguely see her exquisite collarbone and white, smooth skin. Her pretty face was not as sacred as it used to be. Instead, it was slightly flushed, making her look very attractive. On the spacious bed, the Holy Son of Heaven was lying under the blanket. Only her white shoulders were exposed. She was sleeping very peacefully. Looking at the adorable girl's naivety, Noah's heart was filled with pity. Noah reached out his hand and gently smoothed the hair of the holy and alluring girl. Then, he kissed the Holy Son of Heaven's forehead and murmured in a low voice as if he was sleep-talking. "Wait for me to come back." After that, Noah looked deeply at the Holy Son of Heaven, then turned around and walked towards the door. Gotcha! With a slight creak, Noah opened the door. Bang! With the soft sound of the door closing, Noah disappeared from this space. The whole room returned to silence, but the warm atmosphere in the air did not dissipate. Ugh! After an unknown amount of time, the Holy Son of Heaven slowly woke up with a soft moan. The Holy Son of Heaven first looked around in a daze, then suddenly woke up and subconsciously got up. A corner of the blanket fell from the Holy Son of Heaven's body, exposing the Holy Son of Heaven's extremely curvaceous and seductive back. Just like that, the young girl held onto the blanket, protecting the front of her body, while her gaze swept around her surroundings. She did not find the figure that she could see clearly even in her dreams. The Holy Son of Heaven seemed to understand something and muttered. "Did he leave?" The Holy Son of Heaven looked at the clothes on the hanger and felt the warmth and smell of the man in love. The Holy Son of Heaven took a deep breath and looked out of the window and muttered to herself, "Have a safe journey, my beloved." After coming out of the holy residence, Noah turned his head and looked in the direction of a window as if he had been enlightened. Noah glanced at that place with some reluctance, after which he did not linger any longer and directly walked forward. In front of the holy residence, a luxurious limousine seemed to have been waiting for a long time. When Noah walked up, the driver immediately got down from the driver's seat and opened the door facing the holy residence. Noah got in the car and drove forward with the luxurious limousine. The scenery outside the window continued to pass by. After a while, the holy residence was completely out of sight. However, Noah would never forget. There a person was waiting for him. "This time, I will not let you wait for 3 years." This sentence naturally came out of Noah's mouth. Under such circumstances, the limousine gradually went away and drove along the road to the end of the endless road. The private plane to Fairyland was not in the airport but in another area. After all, the police belonging to Fairy Tale also needed to follow Noah and his group back to Fairyland and the guild. A total of nearly 2,000 people naturally could not enter the airport together, otherwise it would definitely cause a commotion. Besides, when the police officers from Fairy Tale came to the Tokyo area, they took a military helicopter instead of a regular plane. Naturally, they wouldn't be waiting at the airport. For the sake of these military helicopters, the Holy Son of Heaven had specially cleared out a large area in the outer region for the use of Fairy Tale. Usually, there were police from Fairy Tale stationed here, so there was no need to worry about safety. In the limousine, Noah came directly to the airport. Here, pairs of police had already gathered and were chatting in the vast area. Mugung, Rintaro, Hina, Xiashur, and Yenju were also present. Behind the police, there were hundreds of military helicopters parked there. It was a spectacular sight. "The president is here." At a certain moment, a sharp-eyed child called out, causing everyone present to instantly quiet down and turn their gazes towards the direction of the voice. Noah slowly made his way over to them, only to receive peculiar looks from Mugung, Rintaro, Hina, Yenju, and Xiashur. Noah stopped and asked suspiciously, "Why are you looking at me like that?" Hearing that, Mugung and his group exchanged glances before looking at Noah again. "Brother," Hina said softly, "you didn't go back to the hotel yesterday." Noah's expression froze. Only then did Noah realize a very serious problem. Mugung and his group all knew that every night, Noah would go to the sage residence to meet the sage child. However, last night, Noah did not return to the hotel at all. In this situation, as long as one's EQ was not shockingly low, they would most likely understand what was going on. Therefore, Noah's expression became extremely unnatural. Looking at Noah's extremely unnatural expression, everyone seemed to have confirmed their guesses, and their expressions changed one by one. "I didn't expect our president to be such a beast." Mugung mocked with a fake smile. "Brother, did you betray me in the end?" Hina had a sad expression. "As expected of the president, you actually hooked up with the sage child." Yenju said vulgar words that normal girls and children would not say. "I misjudged you, president." Xiashur had a look of reproach. Under the situation where all the girls were complaining, only Rentaro could not help but give Noah a thumbs up. However, this thumbs up attracted the hatred of all the girls. Mugung, Hina, Yenju, and Xiashur all looked at Rentaro with murderous gazes. Rentaro's body trembled, and he unwillingly withdrew his thumbs. He looked up at the sky with an expression that said, "I don't know anything." What a disloyal bastard. Noah cursed in his heart and then laughed dryly. "Well, I had some things to do last night." "Oh." Mugung narrowed his eyes. Some things to do. Some things to do. Hina, Yenju, and Xiashur also narrowed their eyes and stared at Noah as if they were looking at a criminal. Being stared at by a group of girls, the corners of Noah's mouth twitched. Stare. The girls continued to stare at Noah. This time, even Noah felt a lot of pressure. In the end, Noah could only surrender and say, "Look at me." "I say, why are you looking at me like this? What are you planning to do?" The girls snorted arrogantly and turned their heads away, ignoring Noah completely. All right. Mugging immediately turned around and spoke to all the police officers from Fairy Tale. Our president has arrived. Everyone, let's board the plane. Yes. All the police officers responded in unison. Then, they split up and boarded the military helicopters in an orderly manner. Hina Xiashi Yanju, Mugging said. We'll go as well. Okay. Hina, Xiashi, and Yanju nodded in unison without any objections. Then, the four girls did not even look at Noah as they walked toward a helicopter not far away. Noah was speechless as he watched the four girls walk away as if there was no one else around. Ryutaru didn't leave. He remained where he was and patted Noah's shoulder with emotion as he said this. It's okay, I'll stay with you. You. Noah glanced at Ryutaru and sighed. Without saying anything, he walked away. Ryutaru was stunned. When he finally came to his senses, Ryutaru felt like his lungs were about to explode. I'm staying with you out of the kindness of my heart. Why are you reacting like that? Amidst the commotion, the police officers from Fairy Tale all boarded the military helicopters. Then, the propellers of the military helicopters began to spin rapidly, creating a strong gust of wind as they flew into the distance. Chapter 2172. Fairyland was located not far from the Tokyo area. After all, Noah had lived in Tokyo before, and the location he chose to build Fairyland would not be too far away. At the very least, if the people of Fairyland wanted to go to Tokyo, they could go back and forth several times in a day. Of course, that was if they took a plane. Noah and his party took a military helicopter. Therefore, after about 3 hours, the bustling fortress city slowly appeared before everyone's eyes in the cabin. Through the helicopter's window, Noah, who saw Fairyland from above, once again recognized the prosperity of the city. The towering city wall made of rhenium metal surrounded the entire city, leaving only a huge city gate at the front of the city. Inside the city, there were many tall buildings like a steel hedgehog. And at the very center of the city, a towering building that looked as if it could reach the clouds stood there, looking at the unbelievable city. Even Noah was a little doubtful about how the city was built in just 3 short years. With that in mind, Noah suddenly spoke. There should be teaching facilities in Fairyland, right? Noah's words left Mugging, Hina, Xiashi, Yanju, and Rintaro slightly startled. Of course there is. Mugging replied with some doubt. Normally, the cursed child is only around 10 years old, and the oldest is no more than 14 years old. Children at this age should be obedient in school, so they have to focus on education. Isn't this the philosophy that you left behind? That's true. Noah shook his head with a smile, and could not help feeling a little melancholy. 3 years ago, when we were in Tokyo, there were only 1 or 2 teaching facilities in the guild, but now there should be a lot, right? According to recent statistics, there are a total of 1,325 teaching facilities that are still in operation, Xiashi said. After all, the cursed children are all at the age where they should go to school, and Fairyland gathers the cursed children from all over the world. Depending on the situation, there should be more construction in the future. Would you like to take a look at the school, Guildmaster? Yanju raised her hand excitedly. Then do you want to go to my school to take a look? Your school? Noah asked in surprise. Are you in school? Because going to school is very interesting, Yanju said matter-of-factly. Although I rarely have the chance to go to school because I have to travel all over the world with Rintaro, I've always cherished my time in school. Of the 3 of us, only Yanju still insists on going to school, Tina explained. Because I've always been sleepy during the day, and because I'm usually busy with my tasks, I gave up. Miss Xiashi needs to assist Miss Mugging, so she also doesn't go to school. But with Miss Xiashi's knowledge, she should have long surpassed the level of a university. He was indeed worthy of being called a think tank. At the age of 13, he had already finished all the university courses. He was even more of a straight-A student than a straight-A student. How is it? Does guild leader want to visit my school? Yanju asked expectantly. I can introduce you to my friends. Yanju's friend? Noah couldn't help but ponder for a moment before smiling. Let's go to Yanju's school first. Yenju's school was not very far from the office building of Fairy Tale. After alighting from the helicopter, Noah, Rintaro, Mugung, Hina, Xiaoshi, and Yenju went straight to the school. Of course, as the guild leader of Fairyland, Noah was immediately surrounded by all the children as soon as he entered the school. Guild leader! 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 The children surrounded Noah one by one, jumping up and down and shouting non-stop, which made Noah laugh bitterly. You guys! Yenju stepped forward and separated everyone. She stood in front of Noah with her hands on her hips, looking very arrogant. Don't harass the guild leader. Can't you see that the guild leader is troubled? Yenju's words immediately attracted the protests of the children. Undoubtedly, Yenju-chan wants to monopolize the guild leader. That's right. What's wrong with sharing some with us? Stingy. I'm not stingy, Yenju said fiercely. I brought the guild leader here to have fun. If the guild leader is scared away by you and never comes back, what should we do? However, the group of children did not pay any attention to Yenju and spoke one after another. The guild leader never comes here in the first place. It's rare for him to come here. I don't even know if he'll come again. Yenju must want to monopolize the guild leader. She'll definitely make the guild leader hate her. How can the guild leader hate me? Yenju exploded. I'm different from you. Let me tell you, not only was I taught by the guild leader in school, but the guild leader also told me stories. Stories. All the children were stunned for a moment. Then they showed an interested expression and shouted at Noah. Guild leader, tell us a story too. Yeah, we want to hear stories. The group of children ignored Yenju and pushed the screaming Yenju out of the crowd. Once again they surrounded Noah and jumped up and down shouting. Looking at the children around him, looking at the curiosity in their scarlet eyes, Noah was silent for a while, then smiled. Do you know why our guild is called Fairy Tale? This sentence caused the group of children to look at each other in dismay. Then, they revealed curious expressions and started to clamor again. Why? 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 Why is the guild called Fairy Tale? Amidst the excited and curious voices of the children, Noah smiled. Actually, whether fairies have tails or even exist, no one knows. Noah touched the head of the child closest to him. Even I don't know. Hearing this, the group of children was instantly shocked. In the hearts of these children, Noah was the greatest person, and no one could compare. Without Noah, Fairyland would not exist. Without Fairyland, the cursed children would all be treated inhumanely. It was all thanks to Noah that they could have the life they had now. Therefore, in the hearts of the children, Noah had long been omnipotent. Now Noah actually said such a thing, which naturally surprised the children. Even the guild master doesn't know if fairies have tails. Doesn't that mean that fairies are more powerful than the guild master? Has the guild master never seen a fairy before? Haven't you? Under the barrage of questions from the group of children, Noah smiled without saying a word. Instead of answering, he only said this sentence. Does anyone want to know if fairies have tails? Yes. The children answered in unison without hesitation. If that's the case, then go look for it yourselves. Noah suddenly smiled. When you find fairies and solve the riddle that even I couldn't solve, then all of you will become more powerful than me. But no matter what, all of you must remember one thing. No matter where you go, no matter what difficulties you encounter, you must never give up hope. As long as you believe in hope, fairies will appear by your side. And Fairyland will always be your home. Noah's words made the children's eyes light up one after another, flashing with a dazzling brilliance. They believed that those words would become an indelible brand, engraved in the depths of the children's hearts. No matter what happened in the future, these children would always carry such a dream in their hearts. That was to chase fairies, to chase hope. As long as they could accomplish that, then they could surpass the idols that everyone worshipped and looked forward to. When that time comes, whether fairies have tails or not would no longer matter. Because these children would surely discover it, right? The fairies that could protect them would always be by their side. And that was Fairyland. In the direction of the door, Mugung, Hina, Xiaoshi, Yenju, and Ryotaro all showed a warm smile when they saw this. Chapter 2173. After spending the whole morning in Yenju's school, Noah slowly left amidst the reluctant farewells of the children. However, Noah did not directly return to Fairy Tale. Instead, as if something had piqued his interest, he began to wander around the entire fairy town accompanied by Mugung, Hina, Xiashi, Yenju and Rintaro. Sometimes he would tour around some very creative buildings. Sometimes he would wander around some very meaningful places. Sometimes he would ride in a limousine on the roads. Sometimes he would play with children on the side of the road. Thus, Noah would sometimes walk and sometimes use transportation, aimlessly heading to one place after another. It was as if he wanted to visit the entirety of Fairyland and get to know everyone, going to and fro without getting tired of it, enjoying himself immensely. When he was hungry, he would talk to the owners of the stalls and ask them to give him some food to fill his stomach. When he was thirsty, he would find a place and ask for some drinks from others. When he was in the mood, he would help out with the household chores. When his hands were itchy, he would fight with some policemen in the gym and training ground, and they were evenly matched. On this day, Noah seemed to have completely become a tourist and a child, either running around or being willful and playful. These performances made Mugging and the others who had been accompanying Noah dumbfounded. After all, in the eyes of Mugging and the others, although Noah was easy to talk to, once he encountered a problem, his performance was better than anyone else. 3 years ago, without any power or influence, Noah was able to force the celestial Tong family to step down by himself. Not long ago, when faced with difficulties from countries all over the world, Noah was also able to turn misfortune into blessings. Not only did he not give the countries all over the world a chance to make trouble, he even turned the tables and made all the countries suffer. In addition, he once single-handedly took care of the Stage V protozoa, annihilating an army of thousands of protozoa with one move. Even a large number of mechanical soldiers of the Wuxiang Association were cleanly defeated. He had unimaginable power. These deeds made everyone clearly aware. Undoubtedly, they recognized Noah's ability. Powerful, mysterious, excellent, tyrannical. These people were the leader of Fairy Tale in the eyes of the world Noah Dole. Even Mugging and the others saw Noah in this way. But today, Noah overturned everyone's impression of him. Mugung, Hina, Xiashi, Yenju, and Rintaro were all very surprised to see this. However, no one said anything about this. That was because they all knew why Noah was acting like this. And so Mugung, Hina, Xiashi, Yenju, and Rintaro accompanied Noah the entire time. They didn't urge Noah to return to Fairy Tale. In fact, they even put down all of their burdens to play with Noah. They played until the evening. Even Mugung, Hina, Xiashi, Yenju, and Rintaro were exhausted after playing for an entire afternoon. Apart from exhaustion, everyone also felt a sense of novelty. It was as if their mood had suddenly become cheerful, or as if all the depression in their hearts had been vented. They felt very happy. As a high-ranking member of Fairy Tale, other than Yenju who would occasionally enjoy the life of a child, how could the rest of them have any form of entertainment on a daily basis? But today, while playing with Noah, the group went to many places. There was a skating rink. There was an amusement park. There was a gymnasium. There was a zoo. There was everything, and they played with many of the entertainment facilities in Fairyland. It was as if all of their entertainment time had been concentrated on today. The group really had a lot of fun. If it was any other place, they definitely wouldn't be able to have so much fun, right? After all, in Fairyland, they were all famous people, not much different from popular idols. Once they went out on the streets, they would definitely be surrounded. However, in Fairyland, the people who surrounded Noah's group were all children. Therefore, Noah's group was naturally happy to play with the children. They played with the children almost everywhere they went, and it felt like they were having fun with the people. It was not until the evening that the unrestrained fun finally came to an end. However, the group still did not return to Fairy Tale. This time, however, it was not Noah who wanted to play around on a whim. Instead, Mugging and the others pulled Noah into a KTV and had a gathering. Cheers! Inside a KTV suite, Noah, Mugino, Rintaro, Hina, Xiashi, and Yenju all raised the glasses in their hands and clinked them in unison, causing the crisp sound to echo throughout the room. At the same time, a joyous atmosphere filled the air, causing everyone's faces to be filled with smiles. Then, the group chose to drink the drinks in their hands at the same time. Phew! Yanju exclaimed happily. So comfortable. After running around all day, I finally have something to drink. Hina also had a comfortable expression. I've been thirsty for a long time. The drinks in this shop are all sold in direct cooperation with famous manufacturers, so there's a fresh feeling in there. Xiashi showed off his genius halo. I heard that the drinks here are much better than other places, and it's a favorite of the young people. Is that so? Yanju's eyes lit up, and she spoke without hesitation. I want to drink. No, Ryotaro retorted with a single sentence. Minors are not allowed to drink. Sigh. Yanju sighed in dissatisfaction. How can you do that? Riki-kun is right. Mugging agreed. You're not old enough to drink yet, so you're not allowed to drink. Hearing that, not only did Yanju lower her head dejectedly, but even Hina and Xiashi, who were eager to try, were disappointed. Although the three children had different personalities, as children, their curiosity was particularly strong, especially when it came to things like alcohol. Everyone knew that only adults could drink, so most children would want to try it out of curiosity. However, alcohol was not a good thing for children. Thus, Noah also threatened. If you three girls dare to drink secretly, you'll get ulcers on your mouth. Ulcers? Hina and Yanju immediately covered their mouths. Liar, Xiashi said calmly. Alcohol doesn't cause ulcers, and even if it does, it should be in the stomach, not the mouth, right? That's not necessarily the case. Noah smiled as if it was true. If you don't believe me, you can give it a try. Seeing Noah's meaningful smile, Xiashi hesitated. Could it be that the knowledge he learned was wrong? Alright, stop scaring my Xiashi. Mugging rolled her eyes at Noah. No matter how smart she is, she's still just a child. Do you want her to be so conflicted that she can't sleep at night? Under normal circumstances, someone who can't sleep because of conflict shouldn't appear in a child, Ryotaro said bluntly. If she really is a child, then she'll sleep more happily than anyone else. Ryotaru's words caused 3 feet to stomp on him, causing him to cry out in pain. Hina, Xiashi, and Yanju harumphed coldly, leaving Ryotaru with the back of their heads. So he didn't dare to say anything. Seeing this, Noah couldn't help but feel a little amused. Mugging sat next to Noah. Looking at Noah's face, Mugging spoke in a low voice. Now you can relax a little, right? Don't worry. Noah was stunned. I know that you must be planning to do something extremely important. Otherwise, you wouldn't have shown such an expression in the hotel. And you wouldn't have acted so strangely today, Mugging said, looking straight into Noah's eyes. I just want to tell you that no matter what you're planning to do, don't forget that the reason all the residents of Fairyland are laughing like they are today is because of you. Including me, that's the same. Mugging showed a beautiful smile. So you must remember to come back. Mugging's words made Noah smile. Of course. Chapter 2174. Finally, night came to Fairyland. In the heart of the bustling city, the tallest building in the world flickered with lights, illuminating the area around it. And on the top floor of the tower-like building, there was an office. That office was an office that only the ruler with the highest position in the entire Fairyland could have. Click! Amidst a soft sound, a person opened the door outside the vast and luxurious office and walked in. Is this the place? Noah looked around the office and sighed from the bottom of his heart. I can't believe this is mine. The size of the office alone was enough to be used as a basketball court. The floor was covered with a luxurious red carpet. The furnishings and decorations around the room also displayed an extraordinary sense of nobility. The deepest part of the office was not a wall, but a glass window that replaced a wall. No matter how one looked at it, this was a place that only the rich could have. In fact, the owner of this office was indeed a rich person. With Fairyland's current economic ability, it would not be an exaggeration to call it the richest country in the world. After all, Fairyland earned the world's money. Just like Eulalie in the world of seeking a chance encounter in the underground city. The world's wealth flowed here, and it was impossible not to be rich. It was just that Eulalie used selling magic stone products as a means of earning money, while Fairyland earned the world's wealth by accepting commissions. The system 3 years ago was the same as 3 years ago. 70% of the wealth would be taken by the police who carried out the missions, while the remaining 30% would be used by the guild for the construction and operation of the guild and the city. As Fairyland's construction became more comprehensive, various other means of earning money appeared in the city. Today, it only needed taxes to sustain itself, and no longer needed the guild to fund its operations. Naturally, with that, the guild became richer, causing the city to become more prosperous. That was why it was not unreasonable for Fairyland to be built to such a prosperous state in 3 short years. As for the wealth earned by Fairy Tale, apart from the portion that needed to be used for the guild's operations, the rest were all recorded under Noah's name. Unknowingly, I've become the richest man in the world. Noah couldn't help but laugh. He slowly walked into the office and closed the door. Then Noah walked back and forth in the office at a speed that was too slow for ordinary people. His hands touched the furniture and items in the office, and even the wall-like glass was touched inch by inch. Finally, Noah sat in front of the overly luxurious desk, overlooking the entire luxurious office, leaned against the comfortable leather chair, and closed his eyes. After a while, Noah raised his hand, and the dark gold gift card flashed in his hand. Clang! In a flash of light, Aster, Athena, Orpheus and Lilith appeared. Master? Aster didn't expect that Noah would suddenly summon him. He was slightly startled. It wasn't just Aster. Even Orpheus and Lilith blinked their eyes in confusion. It was as if they couldn't react at all. Only Athena's pair of bewitching snake eyes flashed. She looked at Noah as if she could see through Noah's thoughts. Then Athena spoke. "You want us to stay?" This sentence changed the atmosphere of the entire office. Noah was silent, and then he smiled bitterly. "As expected, I can't hide anything from you. As expected of the goddess of wisdom." In other words, Noah acknowledged Athena's words. "Master." Aster's pair of purple eyes stared at Noah. Her usually emotionless face changed a little. "You don't want us anymore?" Although Aster's voice didn't carry much emotion, there was a sense of shock, grievance, and sorrow in it. Even Orpheus and Lilith stared straight at Noah. Their expressions didn't change as usual, but there were ripples in their eyes. Without a doubt, Noah's actions were a huge blow to the group of young ladies. Noah's bitter smile deepened. He got up from his seat, walked around the desk, and squatted in front of the group of young ladies. "Is this your first day knowing me?" Noah extended his hand and patted Aster, Orpheus, and Lilith's heads. His tone was unusually gentle. "How can I not want you?" Hearing this, the wavering in Aster, Orpheus, and Lilith's eyes slowly calmed down. However, Noah immediately said so. "But I do have the intention of letting you stay for the time being." Stay for the time being? Aster, Orpheus, and Lilith were stunned. Under such circumstances, before Noah could explain, Athena spoke. "Because, even if we stay by your side, we won't be of any help, right?" Athena said indifferently. "The battlefield this time is in the space between worlds and not the individual worlds. Only you can enter the space that contains thousands of worlds. Others can only use you as a medium, or else they won't be able to travel to other worlds." That was the truth of the matter. In the final battle, Aster, Athena, Orpheus, and Lilith couldn't help at all. This wasn't a matter of strength, but a more fundamental problem. Other than Noah, other life forms couldn't enter the space between worlds. Even Gaia and Alea were only able to enter the space between worlds because they were chosen by the thousands of worlds to be Noah's guides. Furthermore, with the help of the imaginative power, they were able to successfully leave their original worlds and enter the space between worlds. Moreover, this entry was only temporary and couldn't be maintained for long. In this case, if they couldn't even enter the battlefield, how could Aster, Athena, Orpheus, Lilith, and the other young ladies be of any help? Even if Noah could bring the girls into the space between worlds, he couldn't bring them directly into the space between worlds. Therefore, Noah wanted the girls to stay in this world. Rather than watching anxiously from the side, why not do something within my power? Noah's gaze turned to the girls one by one. This world is still in a state of unrest. Even if I solve the problems on the surface, there will still be many things happening in the dark. And regardless of whether I win or lose in the space between worlds, a month will pass in this world. Noah said to the girls. If I lose after a month, this world will completely collapse and perish. If I win, I will have to wait a month before I can return. I don't want something terrible to have happened here when I return. Noah smiled slightly. So, I hope that you can stay and help me protect this fairyland that carries the happiness and dreams of all children. The group of girls immediately fell silent. No one would be willing to just watch and not be able to help at all. If Noah brought the girls with him, they could only hide in the space between gifts and watch Noah face danger. That kind of helplessness, just thinking about it would make them despair. Because of that, Noah wanted the girls to stay here. If I win in the end, then we will only be apart for a month. If I lose in the end after a month, I won't be alone. All of you will follow me. Noah raised his eyes and looked at the girls. I know it's unfair, but I still want to say this. Even if it's for all of you, I won't lose. Give your lives to me to protect. What else could the group of girls say when they heard those words that were spoken so casually and sincerely? Without any hesitation, Aster stepped forward and squeezed herself into Noah's arms. Orpheus and Lilith immediately followed suit and squeezed themselves into Noah's arms. Even Athena's eyes flickered a few times before she finally sighed and snuggled into Noah's arms. Hugging the four petite girls and feeling their warmth, Noah reached out and hugged the girls tightly. Everything was said without words. Chapter 2175. Between the Worlds. The origin space of the world that gave birth to everything. As if it could contain everything, this space was pure white as far as the eye could see. Even at this moment, there was a group of extremely aggressive red that was constantly attacking this space, and even occupied half of this space. Only a layer of dazzling light was left to protect the bottom. This space was still emitting a motherly aura that could contain everything, making one's heart calm. Pieces of feathers floated in the air. Waves of silence filled the space. A pure white stone plate was suspended in the air surrounded by feathers. It was surrounded by mysterious characters that were also pure white in color. It was very eye-catching. Gaia and Aleia guarded the left and right of the stone plate with their eyes closed. Their bodies also floated slightly as if they were weightless. It was an indescribable dreamy feeling. This scene lasted for who knows how long. At a certain moment, the feathers that were drifting aimlessly in the surroundings suddenly trembled, as if they were happy little birds, suddenly becoming lively. Almost at the same time, Gaia and Aleia opened their eyes. They're back. Looks like they're back. While muttering to themselves, Gaia and Aleia raised their eyes at the same time and looked forward. The space was completely silent. However, the feathers were quite lively. It was as if they had all been activated and were flying back and forth happily. Under such circumstances, one of the feathers bloomed with dazzling light. Clang! Along with the pure white holy light shining, a burst of light particles floated out of the feather and gradually condensed into a human shape. Phew! Noah let out a sigh of relief and slowly opened his eyes. The feathers immediately surrounded Noah and circled around him like a parent welcoming their child home. Waves of warm feelings fluctuated. Feeling the waves of warm emotions, Noah's expression couldn't help but soften. Then he met Gaia and Aleia's gaze and said softly, "I'm back." Gaia and Aleia nodded and tacitly moved aside, exposing the stone plate floating in the air to Noah's eyes. Noah was a little surprised. When the pure white stone plate entered Noah's vision, Noah suddenly had a strange feeling. The strange feeling made Noah tilt his head and look at Gaia and Aleia with a doubtful gaze. Then he spoke in an uncertain tone. "Gaia, Aleia, don't you feel that my authority, sovereignty, and favor seem to have changed?" Hearing this, Gaia and Aleia looked at each other and suddenly smiled. "Different?" Gaia asked mischievously. "What's different?" "I don't know how to say." Noah scratched his cheeks. His face was full of confusion. After hesitating for a long time, he said this. "In the past, because my authority, sovereignty, and favor were all related to my strength, I could always feel the connection between them. But now, although I can still feel the connection, it feels like an illusion that I can't touch at all. This feeling was the same as people looking up at the sun. When people looked up at the sun, they could always see it hanging in the sky and never disappearing. As long as there were no weather reasons, they could see it every day. However, in fact, even if people could see the sun every day, they absolutely couldn't touch it. Because even if it could be seen with the naked eye, it was at least 140 million kilometers away from Earth. In addition, the sun was so scorching. Even if one could really touch it, they would be burned to ashes in an instant. The distance between humans and the sun seemed very close, but in fact, it was almost impossible for them to touch each other. Noah felt like this now. Undoubtedly, the connection between authority, sovereignty, and favor still existed, but Noah had an illusion that it was unreachable. However, Gaia and Aleya seemed to have expected this. Your authority, sovereignty, and favor have completely transformed, Aleya said. Now they are no longer the authority of God, the sovereignty of the sun, and the favor of God, but the authority of the world, the sovereignty of the world, and the favor of the world. For example, if you obtain authority from a god, authority is a power that originates from a god, Gaia explained. But now, you intend to seize authority from the world. The power of authority originates from the world, so of course it's impossible to achieve. Therefore, Noah had the illusion that it was unreachable. In the world of God-slayers, humans could take the power of God by killing God and become God-slayers. Now Noah's authority had transformed into the power of the world. To obtain this power, it was equivalent to killing the world and taking the power of the world. This didn't sound like something that could be done, right? The most fundamental problem was how to kill the world. In other words, the power of the world is something that humans and all other life forms cannot bear, Gaia continued. Apart from you, who is the reincarnation of a world fragment, no other life form can accept this power. The same goes for sovereignty and favor, Aleya said. The sovereignty of the sun is the power to control the sun, while the sovereignty of the world is the power to control the world. The favor of God is the power that God gives to humans, while the favor of the world is the power that the world gives to humans. These powers have all evolved. Aleya looked at Noah. Apart from you, no one can fuse them into their bodies. Hearing this, Noah turned his gaze and stared at the pure white stone plate. The pure white stone plate seemed to be able to sense the presence of its owner, and a misty light flowed through it. It was abnormally beautiful. Okay, little Noah, Gaia said. It's time for you to take back everything that belongs to you. Accept them and fuse them into your body like before. Not only will you obtain power equivalent to a world, but your own infinite possibilities that can rival a world will also be triggered, and you will undergo a complete transformation, Aleya said solemnly. At that time, you will be the strongest, and you will have the ticket to the final battle. Gaia and Aleya's words made Noah's gaze on the stone plate change. It became complicated and complicated. Noah knew that as long as he walked forward and fused the power that countless people yearned for but could not obtain into his body, he would obtain a terrifying power that even God could not touch. However, at the same time, Noah would have to carry out the only mission that he was born with. Whether the final result would be good or bad, it would not be up to the heavens to decide. After all, the heavens were just a part of the world. As for Noah, he had to save millions of worlds and lives. Noah had to rely on himself to fight for everything. Give it his all. With that thought in mind, Noah looked up and spoke abruptly to Gaia and Aleya. Before that, I want to return home. Home. Gaia and Aleya were stunned. Don't worry, I won't stay for long. I have no regrets, Noah smiled. So before the final battle, I want to see my family, my grandfather, and my wife. Gaia and Aleya glanced at each other. Gaia and Aleya looked at Noah at the same time after glancing at the dazzling barrier that had been resisting the densely packed red reapers in midair. One day, Gaia raised a finger with an unprecedentedly serious expression. You only have one day. If you don't return within a day, we are worried that the barrier will give way before you finish fusing all the power and draw out all the possibilities. Alea stared at Noah and said, "So one day is the limit, no matter which world it is in." "I know." Noah nodded heavily. "One day's time is enough." After that, Noah turned around and waved his hand. A feather flew to him, and he tapped it with his finger. At the next moment, Noah vanished on the spot. Gaia and Alea looked at where Noah vanished and prayed in their hearts. They hoped that at the very end, the child could eliminate all his worries and advance fearlessly. Chapter 2176. In the boundless sky, the wind whistled past, taking away the white clouds one by one. The sun reappeared behind the drifting clouds, shedding golden light that illuminated the land, the mountains, and the town called Magnolia. At a certain moment, in a corner of the sky, the space suddenly trembled, causing the atmosphere to become chaotic. A figure flashed out of the void and suddenly appeared in the trembling space, bathing in the sunlight. "I'm back." With this soft murmur, Noah lowered his head and looked at the town below. Magnolia was as prosperous as ever, without the slightest change. Looking down at the pedestrians coming and going on the streets of Magnolia, Noah's heart seemed to be touched. He stared at them in a daze, and for a moment he didn't have any other reaction. This was because the town called Magnolia was the place where Noah grew up. For this world, Magnolia was just a very inconspicuous small town. For the between the worlds that contained thousands of worlds, Magnolia was no different from a grain of sand on the beach. However, for Noah, who was reincarnated from a fragment of the original world, and was born from thousands of worlds, Magnolia was his real hometown. Without it, there would be no Noah today. Looking at the hometown that grew up with him, Noah took a deep breath, suppressed the many complicated emotions in his heart, and then turned his head and looked in one direction of Magnolia. Swoosh! In the next second, Noah's figure suddenly moved, turned into a stream of light, and swept down toward Magnolia below. In a corner of Magnolia, there was a mansion that was neither luxurious nor simple. Noah descended from the sky like a meteor streaking across the sky, bringing along a whistling wind as he landed in front of the mansion's door. Looking up at the mansion in front of him, Noah couldn't help but curl up his lips into a smile. If it was said that Noah's residences in the other worlds were only temporary residences, then this was Noah's real home. Thus, Noah stepped forward, slowly raised his hand, and knocked on the door. The knocking sound had just sounded when a soft voice sounded from within the mansion. "Coming." Just then a series of footsteps came from afar and came to the door, opening it. The person who appeared at the door was a charming and adorable girl. Lisanna was about to greet her, but when she saw the full appearance of the person standing at the door, she was immediately stunned. Looking at the stunned expression on her face, Noah's emotions suddenly swelled. Driven by strong emotions, Noah did something rash without any consideration for the first time. Lisanna suddenly cried out, and before she could react, she was pulled into Noah's embrace. Ugh! A whimper sounded, and Lisanna's seductive lips were immediately captured. Ugh! Ugh! Lisanna immediately began to struggle, her small fists hammering Noah's chest a few times, as if she was panicking. However, Noah hugged her even tighter, and as she panicked, he easily captured his wife's tongue in his arms and savored it. Ugh! Lisanna immediately let out a weak moan, her body's struggles gradually subsiding, and she passively accepted Noah's domineering kiss. This kiss lasted for who knew how long. It was only when Lisanna began to feel a little suffocated that Noah gently released her, allowing the flushed Lisanna to finally be released, and she began to gasp for breath. The two pairs of eyes looked at each other, one filled with warmth, the other with tears. After a while, she punched Noah hard and grumbled coquettishly. "Big brother Noah, you're so naughty. You treat me like this the moment you come back." "Can't help it." Noah hugged her slender waist, his gaze fixed on her face as he said this. "I missed you." His words melted Lisanna's heart. She immediately hugged Noah back, snuggling into Noah's embrace, her voice full of attachment and happiness. "I missed you too, big brother Noah." Noah smiled, closed his eyes, and rested his chin on Lisanna's head, enjoying the joy and tranquility of their reunion. After an unknown amount of time, another sweet voice woke up the couple who were hugging each other tightly. All right, come in, don't stay at the door. Hearing this voice, Noah and Lisanna woke up at the same time. They opened their eyes, turned their heads, and looked at the entrance. There, dressed in a pure white princess dress, as if she was wearing a wedding dress, met Noah's gaze, and said this with a perfect and gentle smile. Welcome back, Noah. Noah nodded and returned a smile. I'm back, Mila. After speaking, Noah didn't seem to want to play favorites. He stepped forward, pulled Mila into his arms, and raised the beautiful girl's face in his arms. Wait. Mila seemed to know what Noah wanted to do. Her face turned red, and she spoke in a panic. Don't do it here. Before she could finish her sentence, Myra's voice turned into a whimper. The domineering kiss caused the supermodel to fall completely, and she couldn't speak anymore. She could only close her eyes shyly and let her unreasonable husband do whatever he wanted. This made Lisanna, who was watching from the side, feel a little embarrassed. At the same time, Lisanna also felt that something was amiss. It feels like Big Brother Noah doesn't seem quite right. The joy of reunion came quickly, but it also left quickly. After all, in the time that Mila and Lisanna felt, Noah had only been away for a month. Even if they missed him, it wasn't to the point where they wanted to die. After Noah vented his longing and feelings, the three of them returned home. During this process, Noah held the sisters' hands and chatted with Mila and Lisanna about some trivial things. Those were all very ordinary things that couldn't be more ordinary. As for what Noah had experienced in the past month, he didn't mention a word. Mila and Lisanna were naturally happy to be with Noah. Even if they were just chatting about trivial things, they were still happy. However, the sisters had some doubts in their hearts. As the people who shared Noah's bed, both Mila and Lisanna could clearly sense that Noah seemed to be hiding something very heavy. Even though Noah didn't say anything and behaved the same as before, Mira and Lisanna could clearly sense that something was amiss. However, the sisters were very considerate and didn't mention anything. They just chatted with Noah and snuggled up to him on both sides, hoping to give Noah some peace and quiet. So Mila and Lisanna also didn't talk about anything important. They only chatted with Noah about some of the housework they had done in the past month, some of the miscellaneous matters in the guild, and the jokes that their companions had made. Noah listened to all of these topics very seriously. From time to time he couldn't help but laugh, but he didn't get tired of it. Time continued to pass. Noah, Mila, and Lisanna chatted on the sofa in the hall, letting a faint warmth permeate the air. They chatted all the way until noon. It was only when it was almost noon that Mira noticed the time. Hungry? Mila asked Noah. I'll go cook for you. I'll go too, Lisanna hurriedly said. Big Brother Noah must be tired. We have to make a good meal for him. With that said, the sisters were about to get up. However, Noah held his two wives' hands, shook his head and said, Don't worry about it. Let's go eat in the guild. The guild. Mila and Lisanna were slightly stunned. In response, Noah only smiled. I kind of want to see Grandpa and my companions. Hearing that, Mila and Lisanna looked at each other, and gave Noah a considerate smile and nodded. And so, the three of them left together, and headed in the direction of the guild. Chapter 2177. After a month, the changes in the guild were actually not small. At least, compared to before the Great Demonic Martial Arts Exhibition, there were a lot of changes. Unlike the coldness before the Great Demonic Martial Arts Exhibition, today's fairy tale once again took back the title of the #1 guild in the Fiori Kingdom, and its strength was even greater than 7 years ago. This was because everyone in the Kingdom of Fiori knew that in fairy tale, there was a Grand Magus ranked first. He was known as one of the 10 Grand Magi, and was known as the strongest Grand Magus. One of the 10 great Saint Magi had single-handedly driven away 10,000 dragons. This Saint Magician had single-handedly annihilated the Black Dragon in the Tacit Revelation. Just these two achievements were enough to make all the magic shooters in the continent look up to him. Coupled with the fact that he was a true hero who saved the country, Noah's reputation naturally made fairy tale rise along with him. They became more and more famous, and attracted more and more commissions and members. However, the increase in members did not affect the atmosphere of fairy tale. Therefore, this guild was still as lively and warm as before. It was noisy enough to make everyone roar in dissatisfaction, but they did not feel disgusted from the bottom of their hearts. At least, when Noah returned to the guild, his companions in front of him did not even notice him. "I've been unhappy with you for a long time. Droop your eyes." "I should be the one saying that. Hang your eyes." In the middle of the guild hall, Naz and Gray were quarreling as usual, with a large group of members cheering them on. They were having a lot of fun. Come, 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 sister will teach you how to drink. I guarantee that after you drink this glass of wine, your skin will become more tender than sister's." "No, that's not a glass of wine. It's a barrel of wine. And I've never heard of drinking wine being able to make skin better." In front of a table in the guild, Kana was pestering Lucy with a flushed face, making Lucy want to cry but have no tears. "I think that compared to fists, swords are more lethal." "That's not right. Compared to swords, fists are indeed more powerful. There is no man in this world who doesn't use fists to fight." In front of the guild's bar, Elisha and Elfman were discussing a strange problem. "Lady Wendy is only 14 years old, right? Is it really okay to start working at such a young age?" I'm actually not young. Undoubtedly, Sister Xuanai still calls me Lord." In a corner of the guild, Xuanai and Wendy were chatting. One had a worried expression while the other had tears in her eyes. Aside from the people Noah was familiar with, everyone else was busy with their own matters in the guild. Makarov and Laxus sat in front of the counter. They were drinking. The trio from Thunder God's Council was gathered not far away from Laxus. They seemed to be chatting about something. She sat there quietly reading a book. Gajaloo hid in a shadowy corner, gnawing at a horseshoe. Hubby, Xiaolulu, and Lily were flying in the sky, playing some kind of game. Familiar and unfamiliar people were gathered in the guild's hall. They were either playing or chatting happily. It looked very noisy, but it was also very joyful. Noah could not help but smile at the familiar people and scenery. Mira and Lisanna held Noah's hands, one on the left and one on the right. Seeing Noah's helpless expression, they both smiled. "The guild hasn't changed," Mira said with a smile. "Although many new members have joined and the number of requests has increased, everyone is still the same as before. When Big Brother Noah isn't here, Sister Mira and I are in charge of the guild's affairs. If there are any big matters, Grandpa will take Big Brother's place to give orders." Lisanna was also full of smiles. Although he has announced his retirement, Grandpa is still worried about the guild. "I can tell," Noah said. Then he raised his head and looked up with a profound look in his eyes. Moreover, it wasn't just the former guild master who was worried about the guild. Even the first guild master was worried about the guild. Hearing these words, Mira and Lisanna were both stunned. Soon after, they seemed to understand something as they raised their heads and looked up. Humph, humph, humph. They saw Mavis sitting on a wooden beam at the top of the guild hall. She was swinging her two white little feet, humming a song while holding a cup of ice cream and happily tasting it. Seeing Mavis's cute appearance, Mira and Lisanna couldn't help but laugh. Ever since the Great Demon Battle exhibition, Mavis didn't seem to have returned to Celestial Wolf Island. She always stayed in the guild hall, appearing during the day and disappearing at night as if she was watching over her companions. Undoubtedly, Mavis was a ghost. It was said that Mavis was a ghost. It should be the other way around. However, Mavis noticed Noah's arrival. She smiled at Noah and waved her little hand in greeting. She looked very cute. At this time, the members of the guild also noticed Noah standing at the entrance. Isn't that the guild master? The guild master is back? He's finally back. One by one, the guild members shouted, attracting everyone's attention. Noah? Elisha turned her head. Noah. Lucy was pleasantly surprised. Brother. Wendy beamed with joy. Lord Noah. Snow also stood up and turned her gaze to Noah. Her eyes were filled with joy. Naz, who was fighting with Gray, suddenly had his eyes light up and pushed Gray away. You're finally back. Noah. Let's have a showdown. Naz, who was shouting, rushed in Noah's direction without any warning. However, before Naz could reach Noah, Gray seized this opening and sent him flying with a kick. Clapping his hands, Gray looked as though he had obtained the final victory and greeted Noah in satisfaction. "Yo, Noah, you're back?" "Yes, I'm back." Noah nodded to his companions and swept his gaze across their faces. In the end, he stopped at Wendy and Snow and smiled at the two young ladies. "I'm back." "Welcome back, big brother." Wendy nodded happily. "Welcome back, Lord Noah." Shwenai, on the other hand, stood there meekly and nervously, as if she didn't know what kind of reaction she should show. Noah didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw the expressions of the two young girls who had a close relationship with him. He stepped forward and patted Wendy and Snow's heads respectively, causing the two young girls to become slightly shy. Then, Noah looked at Makarov and spoke softly. "Grandpa, I'm back." "It's good that you're back," Makarov said, his wrinkled eyes staring straight at Noah. As the saying goes, no one knows a son better than his father. Although Makarov wasn't Noah's father, he was Noah's grandfather. Even if they weren't related by blood, he was still a relative who had raised Noah since he was a child. Therefore, Makarov almost intuitively discovered Noah's abnormality. Even though Noah's behavior was no different from before, Makarov, like the Strauss sisters, could tell that Noah had something on his mind. Makarov closed his eyes and finished the wine in his cup. He then stood up from the counter and shouted to all the guild members. "Let's go, little ones. Prepare for the banquet." "Oh!" All the magic shooters in the guild cheered and raised the wine cups in their hands. The joyous atmosphere suddenly filled the air. "Grandpa?" Noah suddenly looked at Makarov with some astonishment. "Don't say anything." Makarov didn't turn his head and directly said such a sentence. "At least, now you just need to enjoy the banquet to your heart's content." Hearing this, Noah was silent. Then Noah smiled. "I know." Noah turned his head and looked at all the magic shooters in the guild and suddenly smiled. "Then let's have a banquet. It's my treat." All the magic shooters in the guild cheered even more jubilantly. "Long live the president." As expected of the president. "I'm going to start eating and drinking. Bring me wine. I want meat." Shouts resounded throughout the entire guild, causing Naz, who was sent flying by Gray's kick, to jump up from the ground and shout loudly. "And fire. Prepare fire for me." Everyone was startled by Naz's words at first, then they all burst into laughter. The unprecedentedly jubilant banquet began. Chapter 2178. The entire banquet lasted until the evening. Noah had been enjoying the banquet with the members of the guild. Some accepted Naz and Gray's challenge and directly set up the ring, killing the two in 1 or 2 moves. Some accepted Alusha and Kana's challenge and competed with the two in drinking enough wine to count with buckets. Some accepted Lax's and Elfman's challenge and competed in eating who knows how many pieces of meat. He also accepted the challenges of the other members, but what they competed in was the intimacy between couples. In front of everyone, he completely let go of Mira and Lisanna and pulled them into his embrace, fiercely kissing them like a wolf, causing the sisters to be greatly embarrassed, and his companions to make a ruckus, causing Wendy and Shwe to be endlessly envious. Such a noisy banquet lasted until the sky was almost dark, and the drunken members of the guild were supported one by one, and left the guild one after another, returning to their own homes. In the end, the only people who still stayed in the guild were a group of friends that Noah was very familiar with. His friends all unanimously chose to stay in the guild, laughing and chatting, as if they had eaten too much, and couldn't stand up at all. One after another, they collapsed on the table and couldn't move anymore. Only Mira, Lisanna, Wendy, Shwenai and the other girls could continue to busy themselves around, giving water to those who drank too much, patting the backs of those who had eaten too much, and seemed to be enjoying themselves. Looking at his friends like this, Noah suddenly spoke. "There's one thing I want to tell everyone." Hearing this, the group of friends all quieted down and looked at Noah in unison. No one had a strange or puzzled expression on their faces. Presumably, the group of friends had also discovered Noah's abnormality in the course of today's banquet. The people here were all family members who had been with Noah since he was young. Noah had something on his mind. Even Naz and Elfman, two brainless people, could tell that he had something on his mind. Therefore no one expressed any doubts. Everyone turned their gazes to Noah, and quietly waited for Noah to speak. Noah also knew that he couldn't hide it from his companions. Therefore, Noah chose to reveal everything. Thus, in the suddenly quiet guild, Noah revealed all of his secrets. It wasn't like before, where it was 70% true and 30% false. Instead, it was telling the truth. For example, the existence between the worlds. For example, his background. For example, the following battle. For example, the mission he currently had. And so on and so forth. Noah told the people present everything. Listening to Noah's narration, the magic shooters under the leadership of Makarov and Fairy Tale were first surprised, then shocked, then incredulous, and finally incredulous. After Noah finished narrating everything, everyone became silent. Perhaps, this will be the last battle of my life. Noah's gaze turned to the companions around him. There are only two results in this battle. One is that I win, and the thousands of worlds will be intact and continue to reproduce. One is that I lose, and everything will be destroyed with me. No matter if it's a god or a world, they will all be destroyed, and no one will survive. And now, it's the last moment before I go to the battlefield. Noah smiled slightly. So in this last moment, I want to see everyone, see grandfather, and see my companions. As he spoke, Noah even extended his hand to hold Mira and Lasana's hand. His gaze turned towards Wendy and Xuanai as he spoke softly. And also, to see you all that I love. Silence. Extremely oppressive silence. No one present spoke. Obviously they were still in shock. When everyone reacted one after another, the way they looked at Noah had changed. They became very distressed. Especially Mira, Lisana, Wendy and Snow, the four girls. They were so distressed that they were about to cry. The girls never thought that Noah would bear such a mission. Thousands of worlds. Billions of lives. All of this, all of it, was on Noah alone, waiting for Noah to save them. No one could help Noah. No one could lend their strength. Noah had to bear all the pressure alone and fight for everything. And no one present doubted the authenticity of Noah's words. Because Noah was their family, their companion. After an unknown amount of time, suddenly, a person laughed. Now I finally know why you're so strong, Noah. Naz grinned and raised a fist at Noah. In that case, don't worry and go. Naz. Noah was stunned on the spot. At this time, the surrounding companions also looked at each other one after another, and then they all laughed. Naz is right. Lucy's voice sounded full of vitality. Noah, don't worry and fight. Don't have any scruples. I've always believed that you're always the strongest. Elisha smiled sweetly. Since young, you've never let me down. This time, you can definitely do it. The guild has been saved many times because of you. Gray looked at Noah and also smiled. So, you have to believe in yourself. You can definitely get through this difficult time. I also believe in brother. Wendy held Noah's arm tightly, and her eyes were surprisingly firm. If it's brother, then no matter what kind of existence the opponent is, he can win. Lord Noah won't lose to anyone. Snow nodded heavily. Even if it's evil that can destroy all the worlds, it will definitely be defeated by Lord Noah. If you're a man, then you shouldn't lose any battle. Elfman patted the muscles on his arm. Noah, you're definitely a man. Go and fight. Kana threw a flirtatious glance at Noah. I'll help you prepare the wine to welcome your victory. Good luck. Even Ruby raised her hand. Noah, you can do it. Even Laxes, Fred, Bikesro and Alba, Jerlin, and the others looked at Noah. Although they didn't say anything, there wasn't a trace of worry on their faces. Instead, there was only trust. Seeing the sincere smiles on his companions' faces, Noah only felt his heart tremble. Makarov, who was also looking at this scene, smiled and walked up to Noah. I remember the first time I saw you. It was in a forest filled with magical creatures. Makarov looked straight at Noah. At that time, when I saw you, I had a very strange feeling. It was as if you were the only person in the world who had been abandoned. You didn't even have a piece of clothing. It was very lonely. After that, you were attacked by magical creatures. When I wanted to save you, You burst out with terrifying mana and defeated all the magical creatures with the impact of your mana. Makarov sighed. When I saw this scene, I knew that you would definitely become an incredible person in the future. And when this thought appeared in my mind, I told myself that I definitely couldn't leave you alone. Otherwise, you would very likely go astray in the future and become the second terrifying dark magic shooter after Jerf. Makarov spoke his mind for the first time. Because of this, I decided to adopt you. At that time, I completely didn't expect that you would be even more outstanding than I expected. Makarov smiled. Now, I'm extremely glad that I adopted you because the one who is about to save millions of worlds and billions of lives is none other than my grandson. I'm very proud, very proud. Makarov patted Noah's shoulder. So you don't have to feel burdened. Fight with all your might. If you win, Grandpa will continue to host banquets for you. If you lose, Grandpa will sleep with you. At this moment, Noah felt a fire burning in his trembling heart. Mira and Lisanna tidied up Noah's clothes at the same time and revealed unprecedentedly beautiful smiles as they spoke in unison. Come back soon. Upon hearing this, Noah took a deep breath. In the next second, Noah revealed a fearless smile to everyone. I'll definitely come back. After saying this, Noah's figure gradually turned into a blur of light and disappeared bit by bit. Only that fearless smile was engraved into everyone's eyes like a brand. It drilled into their hearts and would never be erased. On a wooden beam at the very top of the guild, Mavis also watched Noah's figure gradually disappear. Only when Noah was completely gone did she close her eyes and put her hands together in prayer and place them in front of her. Her posture was like that of a dreamy saintess. Soon after, a sentence so soft that only Mavis herself could hear reverberated in the air. Please give my most outstanding child your blessings. I wish him a safe return. On this day, Noah brought the blessings of Fairy Tale's family and companions to the final battlefield. There was only one destination. Between worlds. Chapter 2179. When Noah opened his eyes again, a burst of ear-piercing vibrations, like the violent friction of air, immediately drilled into his ears, causing Noah's eardrums to hurt. This abnormal situation made Noah's heart suddenly tighten. He quickly opened his eyes and was immediately stunned. In the pure white world, pieces of feathers exuding a soft white light seemed to have suffered some serious stimulation, quickly flying back and forth aimlessly in the surroundings. Above the pure white world, outside the bright barrier, red shadows that resembled the Grim Reaper seemed to have rioted. They gathered together, densely packed, and continuously bombarded downwards. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Amidst the thunderous booms, the resplendent barrier continued to withstand the impact and shook violently. That scene was simply like a huge crimson wave crashing against a dazzling beach. It was as if it wanted to break through the beach as it continuously crashed against the resplendent barrier. Such a scene made Noah's expression change directly. However, before Noah could do anything, two petite and slender palms pressed down on his shoulders. Don't be impulsive, little Noah. Now is not the time for you to make a move. Gaia looked at the sky, her young face tense. Moreover, with your current strength, even if you rush up, it will only be a dead end. Don't worry. Alea also looked at the scene in the sky and said. They just felt that the barrier was about to fail, so they gathered their strength, intending to buy time to break through the only line of defense. Based on the current situation, they should be able to hold on for a while. Is that so? Noah was a little relieved, but he also said apologetically. Sorry, it's all because of me. If it wasn't for Noah wanting to return to Fairy Tale and see his family and friends again, the current situation wouldn't have become so bad, right? Gaia and Alea shook their heads at Noah at the same time. You don't need to apologize, little Noah. Gaia smiled. As long as you can eliminate your last worry and fight with all your strength, then everything is worth it. Moreover, this battle was forced upon you by myriad worlds. Alea shook his head as well. We can only rely on you, but you can't rely on anything. We should be the ones apologizing. That's not right, Noah immediately retorted. Before this, I had indeed never thought that I would bear such a mission. However, I do not reject this mission at all. Because in those worlds there are family, friends, and lovers that I am familiar with. Noah smiled calmly. If it's to protect them, then I'm more than willing. Hearing this, both Gaia and Alea laughed. However, the situation did not allow them to have such a leisurely chat. Boom. Following an even louder explosion, the entire pure white world trembled fiercely as though the heavens and earth were shaking. It was very frightening. Noah was almost shaken to the ground. He stabilized his body with great difficulty, and the smile on his face disappeared without a trace. It seems like the attack is fiercer than we thought. Gaia's voice was no longer as calm as before. We don't have much time to waste. It's best if we begin now. Alea looked at Noah. Are you ready? No problem. Noah nodded heavily. Let's begin. Gaia and Alea looked at each other and nodded in unison. They pointed forward abruptly. At the next moment, a stone plate that was also pure white in color, and surrounded by pure white mysterious words slowly floated over to Noah. Looking at the pure white stone plate floating before him, Noah's heart throbbed. The throbbing was the connection between Noah and the pure white stone plate before him. World authority, world sovereignty, world favor. Before the three powers transformed, they originally belonged to Noah. Now, the three powers had appeared in front of Noah. Even though they were still as unreachable as before, the connection still existed. All right, little Noah. Gaia's expression was solemn. Assimilate the powers that belong to you into your body. Don't worry that you won't be able to absorb them. Alea's voice carried a sense of solemnity. You are the reincarnation of a world fragment. You were born with three great physiques. You will definitely be able to absorb these powers that no other life form can possess. Alea's words caused Noah to suddenly wake up. Noah was born with three great physiques. 1. A physique that allowed him to be immune to all negative powers. 2. A physique that allowed him to absorb all powers that entered his body. 3. A physique that allowed him to recover all powers on his own. Makarov named the three great physiques as having extremely strong repelling, tolerance, and independence. Repelling all negative powers. Tolerance, containing all powers that entered his body. Independence, recovering all powers independently. Noah was born with the three great characteristics as though it was natural for him to possess them. It could be said that to a large extent, Noah was able to reach where he was today, because of the three great physiques. Now Noah finally understood why he had the three great physiques. It was because he was the reincarnation of a world fragment. Were there any negative powers that could affect the world? No. Were there any powers that the world could not contain? No. Were there any powers that the world could not recover on its own? None. Curses, weakness, poisoning, and decay, all negative powers. Noah had never heard of any of them that could be used on the world. Magic, curses, and spells, all mysterious powers. Noah had never heard of any of them that were not allowed by the world. Even when Noah entered other worlds with the authority of the God Slayer, there was no rejection in the beginning. It was not until the turmoil in the world space that there was a restriction that he could only adapt to within a month. However, it only required a period of adaptation. Of course, whether it was magic power, divine power, spiritual power, or other powers that filled nature, the world could always recover on its own. In view of this, Noah had the three great physiques. With these three great physiques, Noah could possess powers that others could never fuse with. I see. Noah suddenly murmured. Is this how my three great physiques came about? In that case, the world authority, world sovereignty, and world grace were definitely not out of reach for Noah. As long as he could fuse with them, they would be Noah's. It's time to take back the power that belongs to you, little Noah. Gaia smiled at Noah. Go. That's the power you should have. Alea also looked at Noah. Go. Even the pure white stone plate seemed to be urging something. It slightly trembled, causing the pure white mysterious characters and pure white mysterious patterns to flash with light. Noah glanced at Gaia and then at Alea. Then, under the gaze of Gaia and Alea, he closed his eyes and then suddenly opened them. In the next second, Noah resolutely reached out his hand to the pure white stone plate in front of him. Clang. When Noah's hand touched the pure white stone plate, a dazzling light shone from the pure white stone plate. It was the same soft white light as the feathers that represented the world itself. Under the soft white light, Noah clearly felt it. In his heart, the throbbing that had been maintaining a connection with his power suddenly expanded and sped up. Dong 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 dong. A heartbeat-like sound resounded from Noah's body. In the next moment, even Noah's body flashed with white light, illuminating the pure white world around him. Wang. Around him, feathers that looked like flustered birds spun one after another. Like Noah, they flashed with white light. The white light seemed to be happy with the growth of a child. The white light seemed to be welcoming the birth of its own kind. Under the white light, Noah closed his eyes again. Immediately, the pure white stone plate turned into a stream of light and entered Noah's body. Chapter 2180. Inside Noah's body there was a universe sea. It was the cosmic sea formed by the simulated star atlas, another cosmology. To be more precise, this cosmic sea was the simulated star map, another cosmology itself. Stars as dazzling as the Milky Way floated in this universe sea, emitting dazzling starlight from time to time. It was very beautiful. With just a thought from Noah, the light emitted by these stars would immediately expand, giving Noah the power of a Vesta and illusory star Tai Sui, allowing Noah to burst forth with endless power. However, at this moment, all the stars in this part of universe ocean suddenly dimmed. This was because in this part of the universe, there suddenly appeared something more dazzling than the stars. With a trembling sound, the pure white stone plate with the pure white mysterious characters suddenly broke through the edge of the universe sea, flying into this part of the universe sea like a spaceship entering outer space. Clang! The extremely dazzling pure white light illuminated the entire universe ocean. All of a sudden, it overshadowed the light of the stars and turned the entire universe ocean into a pure white color. Just like that, the pure white stone plate abruptly broke into this part of the universe and flew over. Wherever it passed, the stars all retreated. Not long after, the pure white stone plate came to the center of the universe sea, as if it had found its own throne, suddenly sitting there. At this moment, the dazzling white light that bloomed from the stone plate converged little by little, shrinking back into the stone plate. Then two phenomena occurred. Clang! On the pure white stone plate, a beam of brilliance was like a bridge to the starry sky, extending toward the deepest part of the universe sea, and finally, it became impossible to see the end. The pure white mysterious characters surrounding the stone plate trembled all of a sudden. Then one by one, they merged into the cosmic sea and disappeared. With a swoosh sound, an illusory figure appeared in this part of the universe sea. This illusory figure was a phantom formed by Noah's consciousness. That is, Noah looked at the dazzling bridge that led to the deepest part of universe ocean, and nodded as if he had understood something. A bridge to possibility? Athena once said that the sovereignty of the 24 suns from Hecate could be used to explore the possibilities in Noah's body, allowing Noah to achieve great growth. Unfortunately, what was hidden in Noah's body was a possibility comparable to a world, and it was not something that the sun's sovereignty could draw out. However, after the sun's sovereignty transformed into a world's sovereignty, the possibility of being comparable to a world could naturally be drawn out. The bridge in front of him was the medium that would lead Noah to his potential location. However, there's no hurry for now. Noah didn't immediately connect with the bridge. Instead, he closed his eyes and sensed his body. Authority was an active type of power that could only be used by Noah in battle. Sovereignty was an auxiliary type of power that was used to draw out all the possibilities in Noah's body. Grace, on the other hand, was an amplification type of power that had long been integrated into Noah's body. At this moment, Noah's ability value had turned into a complicated message that was fed back to Noah's mind. Noah Dolelv. Max strength. Durability. Dexterity. Agility. Magic. Mystery. Sorcerer. Swordsman. Shatter. Toughness. Magic. Weapon refinement, steel making magic. Copy, refine, and forge all weapons. The level of copied, refined, and forged weapons will be upgraded according to the level of the mystery, development ability. The power of copied, refined, and forged weapons will be strengthened according to the level of the magic, basic ability. Sword's Blessing, permanent magic. Permanent blessing. Reduce physical attacks by 100% against low-level existences. Reduce physical attacks by 90% against same-level existences. Cold Smelting, quick attack magic. Tempering. Tempering is successful and can be crushed. Tempering effect is completely effective against low-level existences. Tempering effect is weakened against same-level existences. Skills, Protection from the World, permanent skill. Equivalent to luck. Events that have a direct relationship with luck will eventually lead to the most favorable results. Growth from oneself, permanent skill. Permanent enhancement of initiative behavior. Enhancement effect is determined according to the 4 basic ability levels of strength, durability, dexterity, and dexterity. What? When the information of the ability value was fed back to Noah's mind, and was known by Noah, Noah took a deep breath. Basic ability level? Development ability level? This did not mean that Noah's basic ability and development ability had no level, but the basic ability and development ability obtained by the grace blessing could no longer be expressed in the sacred text. Because the sacred text was the text used by God, it was a bit too low-end to express Noah's ability value at this moment. It could not be expressed at all. Even the way to express the level was very ambiguous. LV Max. Noah felt a little incredulous. That is to say, my current level has been raised to the highest level. What was the so-called grace? Why could it lead to the possibility of the owner, and let the owner be sublimated? For this question, the gods who gave the grace to the people answered this way. That is the path that can lead you to God. Yes, that was the path that could lead people to God. Every time the ability value was upgraded, it allowed the people in the lower realm to get closer to God. Therefore, everyone knew that when their ability value was raised to the highest level, then at that time, humans could become God. However, no one knew how high this level was, not even God knew. Because so far, no one had ever reached the highest level and become a God. After the transformation of Noah's grace, from the grace of God to the grace of the world. In other words, once the ability value of this grace was raised to the highest level, it would make people comparable to the world. Now Noah had reached this level. Even Noah's magic and skills had changed. The magic that could refine all weapons. Weapon refinement. That meant that Noah could refine all the weapons he knew, no longer like before, where they could only exist as imitations. Even the refined weapons could be strengthened according to the basic ability of magic and the development ability of mystery. So the weapons that Noah refined could easily surpass the prototype. The magic that could weaken physical attacks. Sword's Blessing. The effect of this magic was already heaven-defying. Completely immune to the physical attacks of low-level existences. Physical attacks of the same level were weakened by 90%. In other words, except for the existence of the same level as Noah, the physical attacks of other existences would no longer be effective on Noah, making Noah invincible. Even if it was an existence of the same level, which was also comparable to the world, it could weaken physical attacks by 90%. What was cheating? That was cheating. As for the existence of a higher level than Noah, there was no existence of a higher level than the world. So there was no need to consider this at all. As for the freezing smelting magic, it also became a cheating level. At least, Noah could be sure that if he used this magic now, as long as he spent enough time, even the world itself could be completely tempered. The 3 magic, impressively all transformed into a power more terrifying than Noah's previous power. As for the skills, in addition to the original protection from the world, Noah had one more skill. Growth from the self. Depending on the level of the 4 basic abilities of strength, durability, dexterity, and agility, it was a skill that permanently strengthened active behavior. In other words, it was the permanent effect of the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear. No matter what kind of behavior, as long as it was an attack, it could be strengthened. With Noah's current level, the extent of the strengthening was absolutely terrifying. This is the power comparable to the world. Noah shuddered. Chapter 2181. It wasn't until this moment that Noah understood what Gaia and Alea meant by the strongest, and what it means to be comparable to a world's power. This is just the power presented by grace. If I use the transformed authority that reaches the world level, how strong will I become? Thinking of this, Noah's heart couldn't help but tremble a little. However, when he thought of the existence of the eye, Noah's expression became dignified again. Undoubtedly, I have this level of power, but Gaia and Alea never said that I can win against the opponent, but I need to fight on my own. It is conceivable that the opponent's power is absolutely terrifying. I can't let my guard down. With this thought, Noah suppressed the emotions in his heart, raised his eyes, and looked ahead. There, the bright bridge leading to the deepest part of the cosmic sea emitted a faint brilliance, illuminating all the surrounding stars. I still need to obtain more power. More power. More power. After making up his mind, Noah leaped onto the resplendent bridge in a flash. Whoa. The resplendent bridge suddenly trembled. Immediately Noah noticed. The surrounding scenery was moving back at an extremely terrifying speed. No. It wasn't the scenery that was moving back at an extremely terrifying speed, but Noah was moving forward at an extremely terrifying speed. The bright bridge was like a tunnel of light, causing Noah to turn into light, constantly flashing forward at an astonishing speed that surpassed the speed of light. Under such terrifying speed, Noah didn't know how much time had passed around him, causing his body to become sluggish. Until the end of the bright bridge. That is, Noah said with some surprise. Because in front of Noah, at the end of the bright bridge, there was a black hole located there. Although it was called a black hole, it was actually pure white. Under the automatic movement of the bright bridge, Noah instantly passed through the pure white black hole. Noah only felt his vision blurred, as if his entire vision was filled with white light, causing him to involuntarily close his eyes, raise a hand, and block in front of his body. Not long after, Noah gradually opened his eyes. Then, Noah discovered that he had arrived at a void. This is the deepest part of my body. Noah's face was full of doubts, and he couldn't help but look around. After looking around, Noah was stunned. In the surrounding void, there were bright spots of light that looked like light particles floating slowly like fireflies. It was an exceptionally beautiful sight. No. Noah suddenly woke up. Those aren't light spots. Yes. What was floating in the surrounding void was not light spots. The light spots were just some faint light emitted from the body. If one looked carefully, they would discover it. Among the specks of light, there were fragments. Pieces of pure white fragments appeared. Some of the fragments were big, some were small, but all of them were emitting a faint light. And if all of these fragments were combined, then, it would form an existence that Noah was very familiar with. Feather. Noah murmured. World fragments, that's right. Those pure white fragments were the world fragments. However, it was different from the world fragments in Between Worlds. In Between Worlds, the world fragments were divided into two, and as long as two fragments were gathered, it could be restored to its original state. But these world fragments in front of him were like smashed glass, shattering into countless pieces. If it wasn't because this was the deepest part of Noah's body, then, even Noah wouldn't have been able to discover that these fragments could actually form a feather after being combined. The world fragments that appeared in the deepest part of my body. Noah closed his eyes. It seems that these fragments are my original body. Noah was the reincarnation of the fragments of the starting world. These fragments that appeared in the deepest part of Noah's body were undoubtedly the fragments of the starting world, and also Noah's original body. It might be a little difficult to understand if it was the original body, but it was easier to understand if it was the soul. So these fragments floating in the deepest part of Noah's body were Noah's soul. In the past, Bio and Draeger's consciousness resided here. Once, the soul light that Freya saw was the light emitted by these world fragments. So what Freya saw was the light of a world, and naturally, she was obsessed with it. Of course, Freya was just a goddess, and didn't have the ability to directly see the world itself. If the starting world hadn't turned into countless fragments, Freya wouldn't even be able to see the light of Noah's soul, right? In other words, the light of Noah's soul that made Freya crazy was actually just the tip of the iceberg, the light that remained after the world shattered. In other words, Noah's soul was like these fragments, and in fact, it had always been in a broken state. Then, there's only one thing I need to do now. Noah understood what his next step should be. If I want to have power comparable to the world, then, there's only one thing I need to do. Noah looked at the fragments in the void. And that is to restore my soul to its complete state. Fortunately, Noah had already obtained the medium to restore them to their complete state. Clang! Accompanied by a burst of light, Noah's whole body bloomed with pure white light. And in that pure white light, dazzling balls of light began to flash around Noah. These balls of light had extremely exquisite patterns. Half of them were the 12 zodiac signs. The other half were the 12 equatorial stars. It was the power of sovereignty that represented the ownership of the sun in the past, and now transformed into the ownership of the world. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. 12 constellations. Rat, ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, goat, monkey, chicken, dog, and pig. The 12 zodiac signs and the 12 equatorial stars each turned into balls of light, rotating around Noah's body, emitting a dazzling light. Since the sovereignty of the sun is the power to control the sun, then the sovereignty of the world is naturally the power to control the world. Then, I'll use the sovereignty of the 24 worlds as a medium. Let them become the sovereignty of the starting world. Control this side of the world. Restore my soul to its complete state, and own a world. Noah seemed to intend to embrace the entire void, and spread out his hands. Rise! The moment Noah's voice fell, the silence in the void was broken with a loud bang. Buzz, 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 buzz. Pieces of light fragments that emitted a faint glow, like fireflies, suddenly trembled, like the final radiance of the setting sun, and released an unprecedented light. At the same time, the 24 sovereigns floating around Noah also bloomed with light, as if the entire void had turned into a cocoon, and heavily surrounded it. Under the light of the sovereigns, pieces of fragments began to gather towards the center. Buzz, 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 buzz. The sound of tremors continued to ring out. Boom, boom, boom. The void was also trembling suddenly. The pieces of fragments that covered the entire void at this time turned into meteors, cutting across the sky, and went straight to the center, gradually converging into a ball. Condense. Noah's voice resounded. Under this voice, the pieces of fragments that gathered together gradually turned into a blurry light shadow, as if they had received some kind of command, and slowly merged together. Then a feather was born. Clang. A dazzling brilliance bloomed from the feather. The brilliance was so dazzling that it was impossible to look at it directly, and it was enough to burn the eyeballs of any living being. Only Noah was not affected by the dazzling brilliance, because the brilliance was not someone else's thing, but Noah's real soul brilliance. The brilliance emitted by the soul formed by a world. Under the illumination of the brilliance, Noah did not feel any discomfort, only a comfortable feeling as if he was bathing in a hot spring. After all, that side of the world was Noah's soul. Looking at the perfect feathers, Noah, who was surrounded by sovereigns, suddenly smiled. His figure suddenly turned into a stream of light, flew out, and entered the feathers that were emitting dazzling brilliance, and disappeared. Chapter 2182. Not good. Gaia could not help but raise his voice. After all, we have already done what we can do. The surrounding pure white space suddenly spun, and turned into darkness. The imaginative energy was the substance that formed the world. Even the starting world was born from the imaginative energy. Even the eye and shadow were the same. As for the shadow, it absorbed the evil fantasy of the starting world, and had the ability to destroy the world. When this world was born, Noah would be able to obtain truly limitless power. Only by repairing the starting world, and turning it into his own personal world, could Noah obtain the power of a world. This moment was the key. That extremely soft sound, not to mention thousands of meters away. Even if it was a meter away, if one did not listen carefully, one would not be able to hear it. Using this power could allow authority, sovereignty, and grace to evolve to the same level as the world. It could also allow Gaia and Alea to temporarily upgrade and transcend the original world and enter the space between worlds. What he had done could only buy him some time. The two great restraining forces easily discovered it. Of course, the starting world had already been destroyed and could not be repaired. Stars. 1. The crack was only the size of a thumb. It was the center of the space between worlds. Little Noah has finally started to repair his soul. Under such circumstances, the densely packed death god army leaped up again, gathered into a group, and launched a second attack. Honglong. Gaia and Alea were only two restraints in one world. It was impossible for them to block the shadow that was born from the eye that could destroy thousands of worlds. Hence, the starting world could be considered reborn. Only by borrowing the power of the center of the space between worlds could the two restraints resist to a certain extent. Milky Way. Universe. Gaia and Alea looked at the increasingly violent Red Reaper in the air. Their numbers were increasing as they gathered like a well-trained army, preparing to launch the third round of collective attacks. Gaia and Alea felt anxious in their hearts. They gritted their teeth and extracted more imaginative power, fusing it into the barrier. However, Gaia and Alea, who were far away on the ground, heard this sound at the same time. Their expressions changed as they looked up. On the barrier, a crack appeared. After all, Noah was the reincarnation of the starting world fragment, and was equivalent to the starting world itself. Even a formed world could be destroyed by the shadow, not to mention a material that was not formed yet. Honglong. Gaia and Alea actually already knew. This meant that the current situation was a little dangerous. No, it was not a little dangerous, it was extremely dangerous. However, upon seeing this crack, Gaia and Alea's expressions changed again and again. Let's hope everything goes smoothly. Immediately after that, the densely packed death god army suddenly flashed and charged down like a huge wave from the sky in a more violent manner than before. Gotcha. The two restraints knew that with imaginative energy alone, it was impossible to destroy the shadow. Therefore Gaia and Alea knew. We can transfer the another cosmology to this place. Floating in the center of this space, Noah looked around and frowned slightly. Before that, Noah's world won't be able to be successfully created. In the next moment, waves of white fog rose from the crystal-clear crystal. It transformed into a whirlpool that soared upwards. In the blink of an eye, it swept through the space and landed on the barrier in the sky. With that said, Noah waved his hand, and the world's sovereigns floating around him immediately flashed with light. At this time, Noah was in a white space. Noah, who didn't know anything, still had his eyes closed and was immersed in his own world. Clang. The barrier that had completely dimmed immediately flashed with thousands of brilliance, and became extremely bright. In the air between the worlds, outside the bright barrier, the Red Reapers seemed to have been stimulated by something, and the color of their bodies became a little dense. After making this judgment, the two restraints decisively made their move. At that time, little Noah will have the ability to save thousands of worlds and save billions of lives. Gaia looked at Noah closely. Boom. The resplendent barrier that was blocking the death god army suddenly dimmed from the impact. The radiance on the barrier seemed to have been annihilated and instantly dimmed by who knew how many times. However, imaginative energy can only be used to create and not to destroy. Then Noah whispered to himself. For this reason, even the thousands of worlds seemed to be nervous for Noah. They surrounded Noah and kept circling him. It was unknown whether they were cheering him on or urging him. The barrier can't hold on any longer. The restoration of the origin world was a process of Noah's gradual progress towards perfection. It's very similar to Between the Worlds. That's right. Alea nodded heavily. Wang. Even the barrier that resisted the invasion of the shadow relied on imaginative energy to be upgraded to the same level as the world. Only then was it able to resist the invasion of the shadow. The energy fluctuation that originated from the world itself. Gaia's eyes lit up. Of course, those worlds were not the only ones that reacted. Dazzling starlight appeared again, and turned into a river of stars that ran through every corner of the universe. In the blink of an eye, galaxies, nebulae, rivers of stars, and bursts of starlight formed from every corner of the universe, causing the universe ocean to continuously extend out. "We can only pray here," Alea softly said. Then, under the control of Gaia and Alea, the sparkling and translucent crystal started to spin. At this moment, an extremely soft cracking sound suddenly came from the barrier. With that thought in mind, Noah waved his hand. Two star maps immediately tore through the void and appeared abruptly. They merged with the surrounding stars and became one with them. In the world between worlds, the feathers that represented the world itself suddenly trembled violently. They surrounded Noah, who had his eyes closed, and danced and spun around as if they were in joy. Looking at this scene, Gaia and Alea were pleasantly surprised. If Noah wanted to truly possess the power of a world, then he had to completely restore the world fragment that was his soul. With a strange sound, a sparkling and translucent crystal suddenly emerged from the space and appeared in front of Gaia and Alea. For example, the various worlds used imaginative energy as the material, and then absorbed the fantasy of the starting world to form. At the same time, on Noah's body, waves of inexplicable undulations began to turn into ripples and gradually reverberated. They converged with the surrounding feathers and were extremely harmonious. A bit too monotonous. Looking at this formation, the next attack will completely shatter it. Alea's expressionless face was brimming with a dignified atmosphere. In every corner of the darkness, bursts of starlight suddenly flashed and gathered together to form stars. An earth-shattering roar resounded, causing the entire pure white space to tremble violently. Seeing this scene clearly, the two great restraining forces controlling the core of Between the Worlds not only did not relax in the slightest, but instead became more and more dignified. After countless years, the starting world has finally begun to be reborn. A world that regained life through Noah's hands. Amidst the roar, the pure white world suddenly trembled. If it was said that Noah's mission was to save everything in the end, then Gaia and Alea's mission was to allow Noah to reach this step. The roar was still earth-shattering, causing the light on the barrier to almost completely disappear. Immediately after, the white mist known as the imaginative power merged into the barrier. Apart from Noah, in this Between the Worlds, there were other existences that could be compared to the other worlds. The densely packed red reapers that slammed into the barrier were illuminated by the thousands of brilliance, and they seemed to let out miserable shrieks. Like vampires illuminated by sunlight, they rose into the air and retreated from the range of the brilliance. Chapter 2183. Noah could clearly feel that he had completely merged with this world. Because this world was Noah's soul, Noah's origin. Noah only needed a thought, and he could do whatever he wanted in this world. Therefore, Noah could create a universe. Therefore, Noah could create planets. In fact, Noah could also annihilate everything in this world into nothingness with a single thought, returning it to its original, boundless, pure white state. Of course, Noah could also create life and miracles in this world. To put it bluntly, Noah had become the god of this world. A god in the truest sense. Time, space, life, and the universe were all under Noah's control. However, it's better to have only one planet that can give birth to life. Noah turned his head and looked in one direction. There was a star that was emitting light and heat. The solar system. Noah looked in the direction of the sun, and cast his gaze on a planet that was completely blue. That's Earth. After saying that, Noah, who carried the sovereignty of 24 worlds, turned into a stream of light and instantly exceeded the speed of light, shooting toward the blue planet. The sky was blue. The earth was green. The endless ocean occupied most of the space. Patches of forest occupied every corner of the ground. Noah, who descended from the sky, floated in the air and looked at the land full of vitality below. His heart was surging. This is my world, a world that belongs to me alone. The original world had been reborn. This world was Noah's soul. Noah had absolute control over this world. To give birth to life, it's just a thought. That feeling of omnipotence could definitely make any human go crazy. Fortunately, Noah's temperament was strong enough, and he did not immerse himself in the impulse to do whatever he wanted. However, that did not affect Noah's transformation of this world that belonged to him alone. If I don't do anything, then this world will probably gradually evolve into an ordinary world without any mysteries, just like the original world before it was destroyed, right? Noah thought to himself. But that won't do me any good. With that, Noah pointed at the earth below. Around him, the sovereignty of each world flickered and bloomed with light. In the next second, the entire world shook violently as if there was a crustal movement. However, after the tremor, the entire world stabilized again. This tremor did not cause mountains to collapse and the earth to crack, nor did it cause the end of the world. It was like an illusion that passed in the blink of an eye. However, this world was completely different from the world they had been in before the earthquake. Before that trembling, this world didn't have any mysteries, extremely ordinary. After the tremor, an incomparably surging energy flowed out from the air of this world, instantly filling the entire world. Magic power. The energy between heaven and earth suddenly transformed into magic power when using magic and spells. Divine power. The energy between heaven and earth transformed into the divine power consumed by the gods when they used their powers. Divine power. The energy between heaven and earth transformed into the divine power consumed by the elves when they existed. Light power. The energy between heaven and earth transformed into the light power used by the angels. With a single thought from Noah, the energy that filled the heavens and the earth constantly transformed between various kinds of forces. Of course, this endless energy could also be provided to Noah continuously according to Noah's thoughts. Whether it's physical strength or mental strength, it can also be provided by this world. Noah was in a very good mood. In this way, even without the spiritual core of the third perpetual motion machine, I can achieve true infinity. It was an infinity that was even more transcendent than when Orpheus and Lilith were in their complete states. Like the dragon god, Noah could provide power to other individuals. Noah could also use the energy that lingered in this world to repair himself. Even if he was blasted to pieces, as long as this world was not destroyed, Noah could regenerate infinitely. Noah could even make this world give birth to endless vitality and infuse it to other individuals, so that they could live forever and no longer die of old age. This is the power that the world can use. It's a gift from the world. Noah could not help but sigh. If it weren't for the fact that my existence is on the same level as the world, with the love that the myriad worlds have for me, I wouldn't need to travel to so many worlds and desperately pursue power. Of course, Noah knew that if he really was not on the same level as the world, then the myriad worlds would definitely not only love him. Only Noah, as the child of the world, was the Noah who was doted on by the myriad worlds. If not, then I would just be an individual among the billions of lives that were born. I wouldn't even be able to attract the attention of the world, right? Just like Noah now, he could also create endless lives with a thought and let them reproduce in this world. In this way, Noah was equivalent to the father of all lives. However, with billions of lives, could Noah protect and take care of each and every one of them from beginning to end? Even if he could, Noah would not do it. Treating everyone equally sounds wonderful, but this way people won't work hard, they won't fight, and they won't get any growth. In the end, they'll just be walking corpses without flesh and blood. Looking at the world from the perspective of the Creator, Noah really understood some of the true meaning. In that way, it would be no different from the closed world that I killed in the box. Therefore, Noah did not want to directly create life. Let this world evolve on its own. Noah looked down at the land below. I hope that this world will not be like that world. That world was naturally referring to the world of the dark bullet. If the direction of this world eventually became like that, then Noah might really not be able to resist the thought of exterminating all humans. Is this the way of thinking when looking at things from the perspective of the Creator? After all, if life became so easy to create and so easy to destroy, then it was not worth cherishing. Therefore, in the eyes of many gods, humans were just a group of ants, and it was not without reason. Of course, everything is possible. Noah closed his eyes and quietly felt this world. If I can't win this final battle, then this newly born world will be destroyed in an instant. Now, it is too early to talk about the direction of life. With that thought in mind, Noah opened his eyes again. With a wave of his hand, the glimmering sovereigns of the worlds around him spun and fused into this world. The world's sovereignty had become the center of this world. Just like the sun's sovereignty, whoever obtained the sovereignty could control the operation of the sun to a certain extent. If you even gathered 24 sun sovereignty, you could completely control the power of the sun. The same principle applied to the world's sovereignty. Although this world is the origin of my soul, and the control is always with me, if I let the control of this world leak out and someone obtains it, then unless I act to restrain them, anyone will be able to control this world to a certain extent. In other words, once someone obtained the sovereignty of all 24 worlds, they could become an omnipotent god in this world like Noah. Of course, this world is my soul. If I don't allow it, then no one can have the slightest influence on this world. However, if the world's sovereignty was placed casually in this world, when humans appeared in the future and noticed the existence of the world's sovereignty, then a war against the world's sovereignty would definitely occur, right? Although that could be a kind of excitement, I don't want my soul to only be filled with killing all day long. Therefore, Noah directly integrated the sovereignty of the world into this side of the world. Except for Noah, no one could obtain it. The world in my body has been formed, and infinite power has been obtained. My foundation has been successfully forged, and I have the power to annihilate all evil. After saying that, Noah raised his head and looked at the boundless sky. His dark and deep eyes flashed with an unprecedented, awe-inspiring expression. This battle, I will do my best. Absolutely. I can't lose. Chapter 2184. At the same time, in between the worlds, a battle without any suspense was still going on. In the sky of the pure white world, the dense wave of red reapers floated back and forth like ghosts. They were extremely chaotic at times and orderly at other times. It was extremely contradictory. However, from the movements of the red reapers, one could still see the pattern between chaos and order. When the red reapers wanted to open up a distance for charging, their movements would be very chaotic. Because they would not form a crowd and could pass through their companions like phantoms. They would not hinder the rest of the red reapers and could retreat at will. Opening up a distance made their retreat slower. And when the red reapers wanted to attack collectively, their movements would be very orderly. As if they were controlled by a consciousness. They would attack at the same time. Therefore, when the surging crimson waves fell from the sky and hit the barrier, their speed was simply extremely fast. At the very least, Gaia and Aleia, who were controlling the center of the world between worlds, only saw a blur in front of their eyes. The surging crimson waves flashed through space and heavily bombarded the barrier. Rumble! A terrifying roar that was enough to shatter one's eardrums resounded all around. The pure white world suddenly trembled, causing the feathers below to flutter around like birds that had lost their heads out of fear. The barrier that resisted the bombardment of the red reapers had ripples all over it. It was like a lake that had a large stone thrown into it, violently fluctuating. With each fluctuation, the barrier's radiance would dim a little, causing the barrier's resistance to become weaker and weaker. Kacha, kacha, kacha. With the continuous bombardment of the red reapers, cracks began to spread on the barrier. In just a short while, the entire barrier was covered. It looked like a fragile piece of glass, like a broken lotus root. It gave people a feeling that if they used more strength, they would be able to break it. In fact, the barrier would not be able to hold on for much longer. Even though Gaia and Aleia continued to infuse their mental power into the barrier, they were still unable to prevent more and more cracks from appearing on the barrier. The densely packed red reapers, on the other hand, seemed to have seen the dawn of victory. Their movements became more and more intense. Like the receding tide, they suddenly retreated and rose into the sky, forming a new formation. Isn't this too regular? Gaia couldn't help but complain. Could it be that these shadows really have their own independent consciousness? Judging from Shadow's actions, it was clear that these Red Reapers were not without any intelligence. They were more instinctive than beasts. On the contrary, it was easy to discover the fact that Shadow possessed extraordinary intelligence from his every move. If they didn't have intelligence, these shadows definitely wouldn't have launched such an orderly attack. Furthermore, their coordination was extremely precise. However, if the coordination is too precise, it proves that these shadows may not have their own independent consciousness. They only have a simple consciousness, but their real actions are controlled by another consciousness. Alea calmly analyzed. Perhaps the one controlling the shadows is the consciousness of the eye, and not the independent consciousness of the shadows. When it came to consciousness, Gaia and Alea were the absolute authorities. After all, the two major restraints, one was the will of the planet, and the other was the collective consciousness of humans. In this aspect, no one could surpass their authority. Therefore, the two of them easily saw the relationship between the eye and the shadow. Obviously, the eye is the real culprit, and these shadows are only its tentacles. Gaia curled her lips. Just the tentacles are so difficult to deal with. Then how difficult would the real body be? I don't know. Alea turned her head and looked at Noah's direction. Now we can only hope that Noah can complete his transformation in time. Otherwise, let alone the eye, even the shadow can destroy all the worlds. Hearing this, Gaia also looked at Noah's direction. Wung 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 wung. On Noah's body, whose eyes were tightly closed, waves of invisible fluctuations were constantly reverberating. It was like a circle of ripples, but also like a series of ripples, constantly spreading to the surroundings. Gaia and Alea could both feel that as time passed, the invisible fluctuations not only became stronger little by little, but also appeared more frequently. The fluctuations that could only be emitted by the world itself were so strong that it made Gaia and Alea's heart palpitate. However, since the fluctuations did not stop, it proved that Noah's inner world was still evolving. Looking at this trend, it should be soon. Gaia clenched her teeth. No matter what, we have to hold on, at least until little Noah completes the evolution of his inner world. Otherwise, it's all over. I know, Alea said expressionlessly. However, what we can do is limited. We can only increase the extraction of imaginative power, and try to stall for time as much as possible. As they spoke, the two suppressive forces looked at each other, and increased their output. Within the sparkling and translucent crystal, the white fog immediately rose up like a tornado. It soared into the sky and entered the barrier, causing the increasingly dim barrier to once again blossom with light. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The Red Reaper's army continued to bombard the barrier. Kacha, kacha, kacha. Cracks began to spread on the barrier. Wung, 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 wung. The fluctuations coming from Noah's body grew stronger and more frequent. The entire pure white world was caught in a tug-of-war between these three phenomena. The feathers that represented the world itself seemed to be anxious, pacing back and forth desperately. Under such circumstances, Gaia and Alea could only wholeheartedly infuse imaginative power into the barrier, desperately holding on for a single second. Wung 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 wung. At a certain moment, the invisible fluctuations coming from Noah's body seemed to be boiling and appeared crazily. Noticing this phenomenon, Gaia and Alea were both delighted. The transformation is about to be completed. Just hold on for a while more. However, Gaia and Alea were happy too early. Since Gaia and Alea could feel the intense fluctuations, then there was no reason why existences many levels higher than Gaia and Alea could not feel it. Thus, just as Gaia and Alea were rejoicing, a phenomenon occurred. Xiao. Accompanied by an extremely sharp sound of breaking through the air, a crimson stream of light suddenly descended from the sky. The crimson stream of light was simply like a comet. The crimson comet suddenly appeared, pierced through the sky, and violently descended. Wherever it passed, the space trembled. The dense army of the grim reapers that floated back and forth like ghosts were like seawater that was forcefully split apart. When they were touched by the red comet that suddenly fell from the sky, they were instantly annihilated. Only the parts that were not touched by the comet were left behind. Immediately after, the Crimson Comet crashed into the barrier. Boom! An unprecedentedly loud roar turned into a violent impact. With the Crimson Comet as the center, it suddenly shook the barrier. Bang! The barrier that was bitterly resisting the endless Red Death God army did not even last a second under the direct attack of the Crimson Comet and directly shattered. What? Gaia and Alea exclaimed in shock. Shattered? The barrier shattered? The barrier that had been supporting the joint attack of the hundreds of millions of Grim Reapers was actually shattered by such a blow? Gaia and Alea were dumbfounded. However, the Red Death God army that had lost the barrier was not dumbfounded at all. Now there was nothing that could stop them from destroying everything. Hua! In the next instant, countless Red Death Gods rushed down like an avalanche and directly rushed to the ground below like a raging wave. Wang! On the ground, feather after feather fled in all directions in horror. Gaia and Alea's faces were pale as they stared at the Red Death Gods that rushed down and filled the entire sky. Their hearts were trembling. It's over. Gaia and Alea couldn't help but feel despair. Chapter 2185. At this moment, in the pure white world, more than half of the space was occupied by the blood-red Grim Reaper. Everywhere it passed was dyed with a creepy color. The area that was not invaded was less than 1/10 of the space. And in this 1/10 of the space, the feathers were fleeing in panic. It was like a bird that felt a shotgun aiming at it. For a moment it was a mess. As for Gaia and Alea, they could only stare at the red Grim Reaper wave that gushed down like an avalanche. Their minds were completely blank. As a form of suppression, their survival instincts were constantly trembling, causing Gaia and Alea to quickly escape. However, in this situation, where could Gaia and Alea escape to? Escape back to their own world? It was just a matter of sooner or later being destroyed. Under the scythe of the Red Reaper, which could destroy thousands of worlds, no world could survive. This was not the worst result. The worst result was that even Noah would be killed. In that case, there would be no hope at all. Thinking about this, Gaia and Alea's hearts hardened at the same time. Endless worlds, please listen to my voice. Gaia shouted. We can't let Shadow touch your beloved child. That is our only hope. As long as this child is still alive, even if it is destroyed, it is only a matter of time before it is reborn through that child's hands. However, if that child encounters a calamity, then there will be no more hope. Alea also poured out his heart out. Therefore we can't escape. We have to protect our only hope. The voices of the two great suppression turned into a sound wave that reverberated throughout the entire world. Under the influence of the sound wave, the feathers that were fleeing in panic suddenly came to a halt. In the next second, the feathers suddenly rotated and soared into the sky without any hesitation. They turned into streams of light and flew toward the red tide of the Grim Reaper that was surging down violently from all directions. Yes, the worlds that were extremely fearful of Shadow all rushed into the sky without hesitation. They took the initiative to fly toward the overwhelming Grim Reaper tide. Immediately, the feather that rushed at the front flashed with a dazzling brilliance. Boom! As if there was an explosion, the dazzling brilliance of the feather exploded and turned into fragments. The world was actually self-destructing. Boom 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 boom. As if it caused a chain reaction, the feathers flashed with a dazzling brilliance one after another and self-destructed, turning into fragments. Clang! In the next moment, the self-destruction of the worlds caused the energy of the entire world to converge into a barrier. With a dazzling brilliance, the barrier blocked the Grim Reaper tide. The Grim Reaper tide that was caught off guard suddenly and fiercely hit the barrier. Rumble! Amidst the rumbling, the tide of death that surged down explosively was like a wave that had collided with a reef, and it was smashed to the point of scattering in all directions, causing chaos. Boom 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 boom. The feathers that flew over were still self-destructing, gathering the energy of the worlds to form a barrier in the air, setting up a heavy defense line. Looking at this scene, Gaia and Alea's eyes flashed with a touch of pain. using the huge amount of energy produced during the self-destruction to form a barrier to resist the invasion of the Grim Reaper tide. This was the only method that Gaia and Alea could think of. This method could only work for a limited time. After all, the energy produced during the explosion only lasted for a moment and couldn't last long. Therefore, the amount of time they needed to buy was the amount of worlds that had to be sacrificed. Needless to say, this was extremely cruel. However, this was the only way to continue stalling for time. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The Grim Reaper tide seemed to have gone crazy. It kept crashing into the barrier, breaking through the barrier that could only last for a short time, constantly shortening the distance between them and the ground. Under such circumstances, the feathers in the air exploded crazily, shaking up a huge amount of energy that turned into a barrier to resist the invasion of the Grim Reaper tide. In the blink of an eye, countless worlds rushed into the air and self-destructed one after another, just to resist the invasion of the Grim Reaper tide for a few seconds. That scene was truly moving and tragic. Boom, 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 boom. Pieces of feathers continued to self-destruct, forming layers of barriers. Boom, 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 boom. The endless waves of the Grim Reaper kept crashing down, shattering the newly formed barriers, and approaching the ground. Gaia and Alea had already lost count of how many worlds had self-destructed. The only thing that comforted them was that the speed of the Grim Reaper tide's invasion had slowed down significantly. Moreover, even if the feathers self-destructed one after another, after the explosion, the feathers would still fall like meteors and be absorbed by the worlds below, waiting to be recovered and repaired. Just like what Gaia and Alea had said, Noah was their only hope. If even Noah died, then the thousands of worlds would be destroyed sooner or later. However, if Noah could survive, then in the end, the worlds would be restored one by one. Since that was the case, a temporary destruction was not a big deal. As long as they could buy a little bit of time, it would be worth it. Therefore, the feathers soared into the sky one after another, self-destructing, turning into a barrier to protect the last line of defense. Gaia and Alea could only watch helplessly, unable to help at all. There was only one fact that made the two great restraints anxious. That was, even if countless worlds self-destructed one after another, blocking the speed of the Grim Reaper tide's invasion, the Crimson Red tide was still unavoidably closing in on them. Not long after, the Grim Reaper tide was less than 100 meters away from the ground. Seeing this scene, Gaia couldn't help but become restless. Alea! Gaia couldn't help but shout. Can't you think of another way? If there was a way, it would have been implemented long ago. For the first time, a trace of anxiety appeared on Alea's young and tender face. A barrier that can block the invasion of the shadow. Back then, we only had the ability to create one. At that time, we already knew that this was the only chance to block the shadow, right? A barrier that could block the invasion of the shadow was not something that Gaia and Alea could create. Back then, the reason why Gaia and Alea were able to create such a barrier was because they could use imagination as a material. Secondly, it was because of the power provided by the thousands of worlds. During the World War upheaval, many worlds were destroyed by shadow, and there was no longer enough power to provide Gaia and Alea with enough power. Fortunately, at that time, Gaia and Alea had successfully created a barrier and made it in time. Then Gaia and Alea fused this barrier into the Gate of Babylon and gave it to Noah. They only wanted to use it at the most crucial moment to save Noah's life, and by enough time. Otherwise, Gaia and Alea would have created a few more barriers and the situation would not have become so dangerous. Pung 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 pung. The sounds of the worlds exploding one after another continued to reverberate in the air, and they had long since become incessant. At this moment, there were less than 100 worlds left. Compared to the thousands of worlds, it was pitifully small. During this process, the Red Grim Reaper tide was getting closer and closer. 80 meters, 50 meters, 30 meters, 10 meters. Seeing the Grim Reaper tide in front of them, Gaia and Alea's breathing became hurried. Just when Gaia and Alea were at their wits' end, the fluctuations that had been violently reverberating from Noah's body suddenly stopped and gradually calmed down. The fluctuations that originally made people's hearts palpitate suddenly disappeared, causing Gaia and Alea to be startled at the same time. They suddenly turned their heads and looked in Noah's direction. At this moment, it was as if the movement of the entire world had disappeared. Not far in front of Gaia and Alea, Noah's eyelids trembled and he slowly opened his eyes. Chapter 2186. The moment Noah opened his eyes, the entire pure white world suddenly trembled. For a moment, it was as if the world had suddenly dimmed, causing the pure white color to fade away. Whether this phenomenon was real or just an illusion, Gaia and Alea didn't know. The two great restraints only knew that when Noah opened his eyes and the two met his deep black eyes, it was as if an invisible force suddenly attacked their minds, causing their minds to be in chaos. As for the restraints, their instincts made Gaia and Alea submit to Noah. After coming to their senses, Gaia and Alea realized what had happened, and they were shocked. However, Noah didn't pay attention to Gaia and Alea. Instead, he raised his head and looked at the sky. Noah saw it clearly. He saw feathers rising into the sky one after another, and exploding in front of the Grim Reaper's wave. They condensed endless power into a barrier just to block the invasion of the Grim Reaper's wave for a short moment. That scene made Noah open his eyes wide and endless anger rose in his heart. Pung dash. A terrifying energy storm burst out from Noah's body, turning into an unprecedentedly terrifying impact that shook the surroundings. Get lost! Noah's angry roar was mixed in with the impact. In an instant, it expanded to the sky and reduced the distance of less than 10 meters to 0. The impact accurately bypassed the remaining feathers, bypassed Gaia and Alea, and attacked upward like a gust of wind. In the next second, the terrifying impact storm swallowed the endless Grim Reaper wave. Chi. This was the sound of waves extinguishing flames. Under such a sound, the red shadow of the Grim Reaper, which was the first to be touched by the terrifying storm, was crushed into a ball by an invisible pressure and was annihilated in an instant. Afterwards, the red phantoms of death were swallowed up by the terrifying storm one after another. As if they had been viciously crushed, they were annihilated one after another. In just a short period of time, wherever the impact passed, not a single Grim Reaper wave could survive. They were all crushed and disappeared without a trace. The whole process lasted less than 0.01 seconds. However, in this 0.1 second, tens of millions of shadows of the Grim Reaper were annihilated. What? Gaia and Alea's eyes widened, and the shock in their hearts turned into horror. What? What happened just now? It was just a simple energy burst, and it instantly destroyed so many Grim Reaper wave. Gaia and Alea were completely shocked. Noah, who didn't know when Gaia and Alea were shocked, suddenly disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already in mid-air. Wong 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 dash. The remaining feathers suddenly fluttered around Noah's body and kept spinning. Noah could feel the emotional fluctuations released by the feathers surrounding him. Excitement. Joy. Joy. Happiness. Different emotional fluctuations were released from the feathers one by one, and were clearly perceived by Noah. Noah knew that the worlds were rejoicing in their own growth. But in Noah's heart, there was only sadness. Looking at the feathers that fluttered around him, there were less than 100 of them. Noah slowly clenched his fist. Before the great upheaval in between the worlds, there were still many worlds that were not destroyed by the shadow. There were at least tens of millions of them. But after the great upheaval in between the worlds, there were less than 10,000 worlds left. Compared to before, it was unknown how many times less. As for before the eye was born, the entire between the worlds was still very prosperous. Even the starting world was still intact. The number of worlds that existed in the between the worlds was even more shocking. But now, there were less than 100 worlds left. The pitiful number made Noah's heart burn with sadness and anger. However, the more sad and angry he was, the calmer Noah's expression was. Noah lifted his head and looked at the red Grim Reaper army that covered the entire sky. Even though more than half of them had been wiped out by him, a fierce gleam flashed across his eyes. Immediately, Noah stretched out his hand and held a feather in his hand. As if he was talking to a small animal, he spoke softly. You guys leave first. It's dangerous to stay here. The worlds naturally obeyed Noah's words. Thus, the feathers left Noah one after another and flew down, lingering around Gaia and Aleia. Everyone suddenly became silent. Gaia and Aleia looked at Noah, who was floating in the air and facing off against the endless Reaper army. He was like an ant that didn't know his own strength. At the same time, they held their breaths. Even the Red Reaper's shadow that couldn't wait to kill Noah and treated Noah as a great enemy and launched a violent attack without any explanation seemed to be frightened and didn't have any reaction. However, this performance didn't arouse the slightest bit of pity in Noah's heart. Looking at the densely packed Reaper's shadow that seemed to cover the sky, Noah spat out such a sentence. "I will never forgive you." As soon as his voice fell, "For victory, come to me," the long-awaited spirit of speech finally saw the light of day again from Noah's mouth. Under the spirit of speech that resounded throughout the entire world, Noah's body exploded with violent power. "Undying sun, shining steed, under my command, bring the wheel of light that burns everything to me." That was a brand new spirit of speech. Because the authority that Noah used was no longer the power that he seized from God. Instead, it had undergone transformation and sublimation, fusing with his inner world as one. It originated from the power of the world. At this moment, the power of the white horse that Noah summoned was no other power but the sun in the world that belonged to his own soul origin. It was a real sun, a sun that belonged only to Noah. Therefore, under Noah's spirit of speech, a sun appeared behind him and gradually rose into the air. Nay, a horse's neigh that seemed to have traveled from the distant past through time and space resounded. In the dazzling sun, an incomparably handsome white horse seemed to have galloped from the center of the sun. It stepped on the void and galloped all the way to this world. Immediately, the white horse suddenly stopped, straightened its front legs, and neighed loudly. Nay, the high-pitched neigh echoed throughout the entire space. "Go," Noah coldly ordered. Nay, the white horse's eyes flashed with a spiritual light, and then it charged forward. With a bang, the flames from the sun ignited on the white horse's body. The moment the flames ignited, an astonishingly high temperature swept through the entire world. Chi-chi-chi-chi. With a strange sound, the entire world seemed to be ignited. It was roasted by the terrifying heat, and it actually emitted smoke. At this moment, the space was distorted by the high temperature. At this moment, the heavens and earth were burning because of the white horse. The white horse neighed like this, and like a stream of light that soared into the sky, it violently shot upwards with a brilliant flame. Without a sound, its speed was astonishing. The endless shadows of the Grim Reaper didn't even have time to react before the white horse carrying the terrifying flames rushed over. Then, without any hesitation, it crashed into them. Dong! A commotion comparable to the explosion of a star suddenly appeared in this world. One could only see that in the dense wave of shadows of death, a burst of flames had completely exploded. In the blink of an eye, it turned into an overwhelming sea of flames that instantly engulfed the endless shadows of death. The flames were white. That kind of white gave people the feeling of a divine light. It was impossible to imagine how terrifying its power was. It was precisely those flames that engulfed the phantoms of the Grim Reaper one by one, and incinerated them into nothingness in an instant. Chapter 2187. At this moment, the entire space of worlds was attacked by a terrifying heat, causing this pure white world to distort. The scenery was constantly swaying, looking extremely frightening. And in the sky of this pure white world, the terrifying white flames were still spreading and burning, engulfing all of the shadows of death, instantly incinerating them into nothingness. On the ground, Gaia and Aleia were completely stunned as they watched this scene from afar. Looking at the shadows that could destroy the world being incinerated into ashes by the terrifying flames, the two great restraints were both happy and shocked. The last time Noah faced the shadow of the Grim Reaper, he had gone all out and used half of the 10 clones of his authority, but still couldn't do anything to the shadow of the Grim Reaper. The shadow of the Grim Reaper's overwhelming and violent manner had crushed him like dry weeds, and he had almost lost his life. At that time, if Gaia and Aleia hadn't prepared a backup plan, Noah would have died without a doubt. Now Noah had finally undergone a complete transformation. Dealing with the shadow of death that he had almost given up all hope in the past was actually so easy. Moreover, Noah clearly hadn't used all of his strength. The two great restraints knew that once Noah had undergone a complete transformation, he would definitely be able to deal with the calamity that threatened the myriad worlds. However, this was only based on the fact that they were on the same level. In Gaia and Aleya's view, even if Noah had undergone a complete transformation, he would only be on the same level as the enemy. Whether or not he could obtain the final victory was still uncertain. But now, Noah's performance was so shocking. How could Gaia and Aleya not be happy? How could they not be shocked? However, this was Gaia and Aleya taking things for granted. Admittedly, after Noah had undergone a complete transformation, he had become completely different. However, it wasn't to the point where he could easily defeat the enemy that threatened the myriad worlds. The reason why he could be so powerful was because these shadows were only tentacles. There was only one true enemy. Only that guy was the real enemy. Hence, when the two great restraints watched the monstrous sea of fire in midair gradually burning the Grim Reapers tied into nothingness, Noah suddenly raised his head and looked in another direction. Buzz! As the air trembled, the space in the direction Noah was looking at suddenly seemed to be polluted, gradually turning into a dark red color. Pa-gee! The crimson space suddenly let out a cracking sound, and a crack appeared. From the crack, a dark red liquid began to seep out. The blood that seeped out twisted and turned into red reapers in a short instant. They held crimson scythes in their hands, and red dots that looked like eyes flickered under their crimson robes. The newly born red Grim Reapers once again formed a dense army, like a wave, covering the entire sky. Gee! An indescribable cry suddenly appeared from the Grim Reaper's tide, turning into a sound wave that could be seen with the naked eye, and reverberated in all directions. Gaia and Aleya couldn't help but cover their ears due to the unpleasant shriek. Even the remaining feathers on their bodies started to tremble, as if they were in great discomfort. Noah couldn't help but frown, and his gaze toward the Grim Reaper's tide became impatient. Tentacles are really tentacles. Even if they are cut off, they can still be regenerated when they want to. Gaia and Aleya's guess was indeed correct. The red Grim Reaper that had been endangering the entire, between the worlds, only had some simple consciousness, but it was controlled by a clear consciousness. The reason for this was that the existence of the shadows was just a tentacle, and the second was that the shadows themselves were simply spawn bodies. Just like the human final trial in the box, Azidakaha, who was known as the three-headed dragon. Once he bled, the blood would turn into a body and become the claws and teeth of the three-headed dragon. It's just that for the current me, these tentacles, no matter how many there are of no use. Noah's gaze was directly cast toward the crimson space. He no longer paid attention to the red Grim Reapers as before, but turned a blind eye to them. Gee, perhaps the simple consciousness of the shadows made them aware of Noah's disregard, but they let out an even more ear-piercing cry, as if they were angry, and screamed. In response, Noah just glanced in the direction of the Grim Reaper's tide, and suddenly waved his hand. In the distance, the white sea of fire that was still burning suddenly stagnated, and then suddenly soared, turning into a monstrous wave of fire, and rushed down at an astonishing speed. The terrifyingly high temperature hit from the sky, causing the Grim Reaper's army to let out a cry, turn around and face upward. They only had time to make this move, and the monstrous wave of fire had already rushed down, engulfing the Grim Reaper's tide that covered the sky and the sun. The endless Grim Reaper's army immediately followed the path of their former companions, and before they could even scream, they were burned to ashes by the terrifying white flames, and in the end, nothing was left. As if to prove the truth of Noah's words, the endless Grim Reaper's army could not resist at all. In the blink of an eye, they were all burned up, as if they had never existed in the first place. Then Noah's heart moved, and the overwhelming white flames immediately surrounded the crimson space. The crimson space seemed to have sensed the danger, and suddenly trembled, blooming with an extremely dazzling bloody light. The moment the bloody light shone, the white flames that surrounded the crimson space froze in the space. Immediately, the crimson bloody light seemed to have eroded the flames, and the white flames were dyed red little by little. Want to occupy my flames? Noah snorted coldly. Don't even think about it. As soon as the words fell, an astonishing energy storm burst out from Noah's body, turning into waves of invisible waves, and poured into the white sea of fire that covered the entire sky. Boom! The white sea of fire immediately rose explosively and expanded countless times in an instant. To put it bluntly, the current sea of fire was already as big as a real sun, and it could burn the earth to ashes in an instant. Under such power, the flames that had been eroded into a dazzling red solidified again, and little by little, transformed into a sacred white color again. Burn for me. Under Noah's control, a terrifyingly high temperature swept out like the sun, gradually engulfing and burning the bloody light that bloomed from the crimson space. Hum 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 hum. The crimson space suddenly trembled violently, and it was unknown whether it was surprised or angry. However, whether it was surprised or angry, it didn't matter. I can see that the crimson world you are in can't move at all, and you can't get out of it. Noah stared at the crimson space. Otherwise, you wouldn't have needed to create so many shadows to attack the world, and you wouldn't have been able to watch your tentacles being blocked by a barrier for so long, giving me so much time for nothing. Presumably, the other party was also very clear that in the space between worlds, only Noah could pose a threat to him. Therefore, after discovering Noah's existence, the other party sent a large number of shadows of the Grim Reaper to chase after Noah, but they were blocked by the barrier that Gaia and Aleia had already prepared. If the other party really understood the threat of Noah, then he shouldn't have stayed in the Crimson World to watch the show, and watch Noah get the time to transform, and let the shadows be blocked. Therefore, the only explanation was that the other party couldn't get out of the Crimson World. The previous attack that destroyed the barrier was probably prepared by the other party for a long time in the Crimson World, and after calculating the right time, he immediately released it, crossing the barriers of time, space, and the world to finally destroy the barrier. The crimson space that suddenly appeared in front of him was just a temporary passage that had been opened, and it seemed that there was no way to cross the barrier. Otherwise, it wouldn't have taken until now to open it. It's too late to get rid of me now. Just obediently stay in that world and wait for me to find you. After saying that, Noah pointed his finger, and a monstrous white flame immediately swarmed up, engulfing the crimson space and burning it to ashes. Chapter 2188. After incinerating the crimson space, the monstrous flame seemed to have transformed into the sky, quietly burning above and covering the entire sky. At this time, Noah turned around and slowly floated down, landing on the ground. Little Noah. Noah. Gaia and Aleia hurriedly came to Noah, looking at Noah with eyes full of joy. Obviously, the two restraints were also happy with Noah's growth. It wasn't just Gaia and Aleia. Even the remaining feathers fluttered around Noah's body like little birds. They hovered around Noah and constantly released happy emotions. However, Noah couldn't feel happy. Seeing that only a few dozen feathers were left in the endless pure white space, Noah's mood was very complicated. Although he didn't see the whole process with his own eyes, Noah could still guess what happened. After all, Noah had just completed the evolution of his inner world and opened his eyes. The scene of the worlds exploding in front of him, turning into a barrier to block the incoming shadow, was directly imprinted in Noah's eyes. Seeing this scene, no matter how stupid Noah was, he could guess what happened. To stall for time? Noah's mood was very complicated. If he hadn't requested for Gaia and Aleia to allow him to return home and see his family, he definitely wouldn't have had to let his world self-destruct in order to buy time to complete the evolution of his inner world. Thinking of this, Noah couldn't help but feel a little guilty in his heart. Who knows if the worlds could also sense Noah's emotions and felt the guilt in Noah's heart. The feathers emitting a soft white light were like comforting words, gently circling around Noah's body. Seeing this scene, Gaia and Aleia seemed to have guessed something. Looking at each other, they both cast their gazes on Noah. Little Noah, you can't think too much, Gaia advised. Between making you feel apprehensive and perplexed, and temporarily sacrificing yourself to buy time, If we have to choose which is more important, then whether it's me or Alea, we will choose the former without hesitation. If you fight with apprehension and perplexed, you will lose in the end. That will be a true extinction. Alea said. But sacrificing yourself to buy time is only temporary. As long as you can obtain victory in the end, then sooner or later, you will be able to repair the self-sacrificing worlds. Which is more important, I believe you understand. I know. Noah took a deep breath, suppressed the emotions in his heart, and bitterly smiled. I just feel a little heartache. We feel the same as you. Gaia's youthful face also showed a trace of bitterness. After all, I'm the one who made this decision. Me too. Alea's face was calm. So you don't have to feel guilty. If this is necessary, then we can share all the pain for you. I know. Noah's bitter expression turned into a smile. So, I've always been grateful to you. It's our honor. Gaia's bitter expression also turned into a playful one. To be able to make the reincarnation of a starting world look at us like this, as a restraining force, we can be considered outstanding. Since the millions of worlds chose us to be your guides, we are considered to be a community with a shared destiny. Alea looked at Noah and said, although we can only help to this extent, no matter the outcome, we will watch your battle to the end. Noah nodded heavily. At this time, Gaia and Alea finally had the time to carefully observe Noah. Upon a closer look, Noah was very different from before. This difference did not refer to the change in Noah's appearance, nor was it a change in Noah's temperament. Noah was still Noah. However, looking at this Noah, who did not seem to have changed at all, the two restraining forces had a strange feeling. The feeling was the same as before Noah's transformation, when he faced the complete transformation of the world's authority, sovereignty, and grace. Unreachable. It was the same feeling. Undoubtedly, Noah was standing before them, but Gaia and Alea had a feeling that he was unreachable. The reason for this feeling was very clear to Gaia and Alea. There was only one reason. Noah's existence had been raised to a level that the restraining forces could not touch. Facing Noah was like facing an entire world for the two restraining forces. Even if this world's existence was in the form of a human, in essence, Noah was no longer human. At the very least, Noah's soul had become a world of its own. A world that had undergone rebirth. Therefore, Gaia and Alea were able to discover it. In Noah's body, which looked no different from a normal person, there was a feather in his heart. In the world of elven messengers' sword dance, there was also a feather in Liena Subble's heart. However, that feather was incomplete, only half of it. On the other hand, the feather in Noah's heart was a complete feather. Furthermore, this feather was slightly different from ordinary feathers. How was it different? Gold. Both Gaia and Alea were surprised. That's right. The feather in Noah's heart was a resplendent gold. How can it be gold? Gaia asked in confusion. Undoubtedly, the main body of the world is a white feather. It's not just the world. Even the space between the worlds that accommodates the world is pure white. The imaginative power, that is the origin of the world, is also white. Even the authority, sovereignty, and favor after the transformation are all white. Alea frowned. White is the color that represents the world. How can the world in your body become gold? Hearing Gaia and Alea's words, Noah smiled and said, since the color that represents the world is white, then how can the disaster that destroys thousands of worlds be red? When this was said, Gaia and Alea were immediately stunned. In that case, I have never noticed this problem, Gaia suddenly said. Why would the existence that destroys the world be red? Because it is no longer a simple world. In essence, it is more like a disaster in the space between worlds, Alea pondered. In other words, the essence of the world in my body is the same. It is no longer a world that is purely used to nurture life and miracles, Noah said with a smile. The original world no longer exists. Now it has been reborn in the form of my soul. The nurturing of life and miracles no longer follows the laws of nature. Instead, it is decided by my will. Therefore, this world is dyed in my color. Naturally, it is not pure white. I see. Gaia and Alea expressed their understanding at the same time. Nurturing life and miracles was the instinct of the world. However, Noah's world and his body no longer followed this instinct. Instead, it was decided by Noah's will. Although it was still a world in nature, its essence was somewhat different. Therefore, Noah's world and his body transformed into a resplendent gold color. Similarly, the dark red world's essence was more inclined towards disaster. What it produced was the shadow of death that was equivalent to tentacles. It only had a simple consciousness and was being controlled. It couldn't even be considered a living being, so naturally, it couldn't be considered pure and untainted. As a result, it became an ominous bloody color. And from these colors, one could more or less see the differences between each world. Therefore, the white fantasy world was the most basic way of existence. The golden original world and the red disaster world had an essence that was different from other worlds. Therefore, they both had the power to interfere with other worlds. The fact that I can destroy those red reaper-like tentacles is the proof. Noah raised one hand, looked at it, and slowly clenched it into a fist. The feeling of powerlessness like last time no longer exists. Now, I have the power to destroy everything. Saying so, Noah turned around, raised his head and looked above the blazing sea of fire. He spoke softly. Now, I am ready to go. That you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.